Hi guys, welcome back to Words with Amber. I'm so sorry that I have been so late in getting another video up on this channel.
Get your fucking ass up and work.
I promised you guys, I think in my last video, that I was going to do a video covering Halsey's newest album, The Great Impersonator. I'm a huge Halsey stan. I could talk about her literally forever. I understand not everyone is like the biggest fan of hers, so this might not be the video for you, and that's okay. If you're still interested in getting to know more about Halsey as an artist or appreciate her lyrical talent and songwriting, this might be an interesting video for you, because mainly what I'm going to be doing is going through all 17 tracks of her newest album, just kind of pointing out either like lyrics that I thought were like really well done, or giving maybe some context to like what I think Halsey's referencing from like her personal life into these lyrics, which is things that I feel like if you didn't know Halsey very well, you would just completely miss or like brush over, or maybe not even like get what the lyric is referencing. This is all technically my own interpretations based on what I know about Halsey. I think as all of us as consumers of art, like you could have, for example, like 5 people go see the same movie, and each of those 5 people is going to take something different from like what this scene was supposed to symbolize, or like a different thought that they'll leave the movie theater thinking about the movie, if that makes sense. So these are mostly just kind of my interpretations of like what it made me think about, what I think she's referencing, but I'm not claiming at all to be like an expert on like this is exactly what this lyric is about. So join me on this journey if you are interested. Grab a snack, grab something fun to drink, and just come hang out with me. I'm going to try to not make this video obnoxiously long, but we've got 17 tracks to deal with, and I've got my little iPad here, and as you can see, like this is just tracks 1's notes. We've got a lot here. So let's just get into it. So The Great Impersonator, just for a little background of like what's going on in Halsey's life right before she puts out this album. This is, let's see, Halsey has the Badlands album, Hopeless Fountain Kingdom, Manic, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, and I believe this is her 5th album now, The Great Impersonator. So 5 albums in her career. I believe she's been around since, I found her in like 2016, 2015, I want to say, and I think Badlands came out in 2015. So she had an EP before then as well, but this is her 5th studio album. This album is coming off of a few years where Halsey wasn't really putting out a lot of music. She did like a few collaborations here and there, but she didn't really, it was kind of a longer gap for her to come out with an album, but it made sense for me as a fan of hers because Halsey gave birth to her first child right around, I want to say, end of 2021 or early 2022. And so if any of you have children or families at home, like the first few years are pretty fucking busy. Her being a huge pop star and raising a kid, like I can imagine that like you just need some time off. But unbeknownst to myself and a lot of her fan base right before this album came out, Halsey also was going through pretty significant health issues. She got diagnosed with some form of cancer. I don't know if she ever went public with the type of cancer that it was. But again, for more background, Halsey also has bipolar disorder, which she's been very public about. She also has endometriosis, which is a pretty significant, I believe, chronic illness is how it's categorized. She's also been open about like a lot of trauma that she's been through. And I think she was also diagnosed with lupus. So she has not had the easiest time in terms of feeling comfortable in her body. But this cancer diagnosis was something kind of unexpected. And coming off of just having your first child, she's got a lot going on. After Halsey put out her last album, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, it didn't get as much radio success as some of her past albums have gotten. I think part of that is because her album before this one was not as poppy as her other albums have been. Usually with Manic or Hopeless Fountain Kingdom, you have songs like Bad at Love, Now or Never, Graveyard, Without Me. Like those were all huge like on the radio when those albums were coming out. If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power had some songs that went bigger on like alternative radio, but not as much mainstream. So like that didn't get as much success. Halsey kind of references in some of her lyrics in this album that it seems like her record label or someone in terms of like the Hollywood scene was not happy with how that album performed, and we'll get to that when those lyrics come up. But yeah, she kind of had a few years of like just a lot happening for her personally, and I think a combination of the last album not being as successful, going through your health issues, becoming a single mom. She talks about like that her and her partner broke up as well during this time, who was the father of her kid. With all of that going on, it makes a lot of sense as a pop star that like you might have to take a step back from like all the publicity, interacting with fans as much, and just need time for yourself personally. But because there was those like 2 or 3-ish years that she did that, from my understanding, Halsey didn't make any like formal statement that like, hey guys, I'm going on hiatus. I think she was just truly trying to deal like a human. So it felt like on the fan side of things that like Halsey just kind of disappeared and there was no telling like when she was going to kind of come back. I know some of her fan base would get upset that Halsey wouldn't come out and publicly speak on certain like political events that were going on, especially because Halsey kind of, when she first was coming up, kind of made that a unique part of who Halsey is like someone who speaks out and isn't afraid to go against like the grain and speaking her mind. So I think a lot of fans also kind of were confused and disappointed in her for not coming forward and speaking on certain things because they look to her as that kind of role model, and she also has the platform to talk about issues and get that awareness out. So I'm just leading this all up to say I feel bad for Halsey that she had all of this kind of going on into this album, and I think it just sets the tone for where our narrator, who is Halsey herself, like where she's kind of coming from and writing about this album. There's a lot of themes about death, about health, about the unfairness of like karma and like good things happening to bad people and vice versa. So just wanting to kind of set the tone there. It's very much annoyed me that there has been a lot of like critics online, as told by Kenya spoke about this, which I was like so happy she gave voice to this. There's been a lot of people who've reviewed this album and said things like, Halsey's giving a lot of main character energy in this. And I'm like, yeah, it's her album. Like, she should be the main character. Like, what albums do you listen to by artists where they're not the main character? And it just felt like a very demeaning and dismissive way of interpreting these lyrics, because again, like if you really understand all the context I just gave you, she's fucking falling apart at the time that she has to write this album. From what Halsey has shared in interviews, like there were points on this album when like she truly didn't know if she was going to live to like maybe even see the release of this album or write another one. And so because she was in this space of like having such difficult health issues, she kind of took on this like idea of like, well, if I do pass away, like my legacy is going to be left in like the, 2010s, 2020s music scene. What would it have been like if I had invented this stage character of Halsey in like the 70s or in the 80s or in the 90s or even early 2000s? And so a lot of these songs are kind of playing on different artists or different like styles of music, which I thought was a really fucking cool concept. Even as she was rolling out this album, she did a lot of like promotion on her Instagram accounts where like she would dress up in different outfits and like wigs and styles of makeup to impersonate certain artists that inspired her on this album. Like there's this song called Lonely with the Muse, we'll get to it later on, but that was very heavily inspired by Evanescence. And she does like the look of like Evanescence, like most famous album with, I can't think of the album name right now. You guys are probably yelling it at me, but she like imitates that and it looks so fucking good. The other thing about Halsey as an artist is that she does wear like a lot of like wigs. She has a condition that I'm going to screw up the name right now. I want to say it's like trichomania, where like she will like either like pull her hair or like shave her hair, especially under like times of like intense like stress, as a form of coping. And so because of her condition, she wears a lot of wigs. That's why you'll see her like, blonde at one performance and then 2 days later she's on like Jimmy Fallon with a different like hairstyle. But I also think like Halsey has like the perfect face and style to like kind of like be a chameleon and shapeshift a lot. And so I think she also kind of takes advantage of that on this album, but that's part of why it's called The Great Impersonator. Like it's almost like if she was in a circus, which we can kind of use Hollywood or like fame as its own circus, because it is in many ways. We've seen artists like Britney Spears reference a circus for like their experience. She's kind of taking that circus theme and saying like, my, show or my, nickname as a circus performer would probably be The Great Impersonator, because she can do so many different styles of music, so many different styles of hair, so many, like she can shapeshift so easily. So I bring that all up to say, like, isn't that fucking impressive already without even hearing a single fucking lyric? This woman who's going through so fucking much in her life, she still manages to put out an album, even though she doesn't even know if she's gonna live to really see it released. She takes this moment of like incredible like stress and existential crisis and uses it to like be even more creative by saying like, what would it be like if my legacy had ended in this time period or that? So I'm fucking impressed with her. I hope I've convinced you to take some of these lyrics in and really appreciate them. So without further ado, let's get into the first track. So the first track is called Only Living Girl in LA. I will say there is a little bit of a trigger warning where there is a slight reference to child SA. So if you'd prefer to skip, I'm going to do my best to try to like break up like the tracks in YouTube, that little thing you can do where it's like, press this to go to the next section. So I'm going to try to do that. So skip that if you don't want to indulge in that reference or don't want to hear that. So one of the first notes I put down is that in her first verse, she's talking about contemplating death. She says, I wonder if I ever left behind my body. You think they'd laugh at how I died? What I thought about is that during these 3 periods between her last album and this one being released, one of the main times that I felt like the wider pop culture sphere talked about Halsey or even like asked about her was when this meme resurfaced. It's kind of become a meme of Halsey very, very, very early on. I want to say this is probably before she even puts out her first EP. She's in some mall, in some kind of public setting. You probably, if you're on the internet or on TikTok a lot, you're probably already guessing the meme that I'm referencing. But basically you're in this mall setting and you see that someone has like asked her to sing or something like that because she's just kind of like singing in the middle of like a mall hallway, like not on a stage or anything like that. And she's kind of like just a cappella singing the song I Miss You by Blink-182, but you can kind of tell in how she's singing it that like she's nervous because of like the pitch and like how her breathing is kind of interacting with like her singing, her vocals and things like that. And it's just like obviously not her greatest work, but I truly like, for anyone that's like laughing at Halsey in that space, I want to ask them like, have you ever on the fly had to just sing in front of anybody? Even if you're like a really good singer, if you're on the fly, like not comfortable singing in front of people, you're more comfortable just singing on your own, or like you're just not that great of a singer, yeah, you're gonna have pitchiness. Yeah, your breath is gonna interrupt all of it. Like, it's just so cruel to me that like the internet just took this and it seemed like the general consensus was like, this meme just proves that like Halsey's not a good singer. And people would say things like her voice is like, she's like singing in cursive because she has all these different like inflections to her voice. I've always felt like from the time I heard Halsey's first song ever that her voice is very fucking unique in a good way. And it's part of what I've always loved about her is that like she has these like great inflections or this way about, I don't even know how to fucking describe it. I don't know how to articulate this well for like how to describe the way that she can say certain words, and it's like very cool and crisp and like almost feels like autotune without autotune. But like, of course, Halsey's not a perfect singer. Who fucking is, truly? And especially when you're nervous, I don't think like holding someone to the standard that they had when they were just not even famous at all, just like on the fly singing for someone who was clearly recording them, like, please. So that's my tangent on like that line. Who knows if that's what she's talking about when she says, would they laugh at how I died? But that's exactly where my brain went. The next line I wrote down is she said, or take a photo of my family in the lobby. If you don't know, Halsey is from New Jersey. And so as soon as I saw this lyric, I thought of how in Real Housewives of New Jersey, which I'm watching right now on Bravo, they sometimes as a whole family, this huge Italian Jersey family will like gather together and take this huge photo celebrating kind of like the matriarch of the family right in the center. At least that's how Joe Giudice and Teresa Giudice did their like family photo on the Real Housewives. So it just reminded me of that because she's from Jersey as well. And I was kind of wondering, like, if Halsey does die, now that she became like the main famous person in her family, and I would assume also became kind of the breadwinner for the whole family system, like, does that mean that she also kind of became this matriarch for her like Italian family in Jersey, where like they're all gonna now gather in this like photo if she passes away, and like she's not that matriarch anymore, or she's like, you know, she's gone from the photo essentially. So that's the interpretation I took of that one. I hope that made sense. Her next line is, "'Cause I don't know if I could sell out my own funeral, at least not in this point in time." And here's where I feel like we get our first reference to how it seems like there was less commercial success for her last album. I loved that album so much. Honestly, it's probably my favorite Halsey album because I love when she experiments in anything alternative or rock. She had, I think, Nine Inch Nails like produce that album with her, or two members of Nine Inch Nails like produce that album with her, and they constantly talked about how impressed they were with her. But it just seemed like, again, like it wasn't at that pop radio kind of hit. So it sounds like maybe like as she's going into this next album, her record label is saying like, I don't know if you can sell out like the stadiums that you used to play before with these other more commercial albums. So she's saying like, I don't even know if I could sell out my own funeral, at least not at this point in time. Like maybe I could have done it in the past kind of thing. Next lyric, she says, "And if I ever try to leave behind my body, at least I know it was never mine, it was never mine, it was never mine." And this is where I felt like we got, or at least when it made me think of Halsey disclosing that she has been the victim of childhood SA in the past. She put out a poetry book. The name of it is escaping me right now, but she put out a poetry book back in, I think it was 2020 or 2021. It was like kind of early-ish into the pandemic. But she had a poem in there that very raw and very vulnerably talked about her experience being taken advantage of as a child. And a lot of times, especially if someone has experienced like sexual trauma in nature, they, that's a trauma where like you've lost control, but the thing you're losing control of is truly your own body. And so she's kind of contemplating like, yeah, I might leave my body, but like, I know it was never mine. Like it was never mine to keep, like because she felt violated so early. Obviously, this line could be referencing a lot of things. It could talk about how Hollywood takes over like a woman's body, or wants a woman to look a certain way or be a certain way in order to like keep getting jobs or like keep, staying afloat in their career. So it could have a lot of interpretations, but again, that's where my mind went first. Then the next line she says is, "Well, I'm the only girl alive in New York City." If you don't know, that's a callback to where Halsey got her stage name from. Halsey's true name is Ashley Frangipani, which sounds very, I think, Italian or Jersey-ish. But Halsey is basically taking the name Ashley and just rearranging the letters to be Halsey. But there's a particular station in New York City subway station called Halsey. I think Halsey either lived around there at one point in time or she frequented that stop a lot. And that's what inspired her to take on Halsey. So I just liked that she had the little reference there. You can even hear in the background after she says this line, you hear like a muffled sound that's like approaching Halsey Station, like from what I assume is like how it sounds in the New York subway system. Then she says, "I no longer have a driver's license." Again, if you're a Halsey stan, this is kind of a running joke. Ever since Halsey's first album, Badlands, she has this song on there called Drive. But she often like makes fun of herself, I think at shows or in interviews during this time, where she talks about how like she doesn't have a driver's license. Yeah, I just wanted to reference that because again, it's a small little joke. If you don't know Halsey's inner world, you're gonna like just bypass over that. Like, okay, she's talking about a driver's license. I wrote down that she is protesting or resentful of how much she's had to tolerate or survive up to this point in her life, right? I've already told you about all the chronic illnesses that she's had. Halsey also is kind of a person who, at least from my recollection, didn't necessarily like always have a dream of becoming as famous as she is now. From what I recall in the past, how she's described her rise to fame is basically that she was smoking outside some music venue or some bar, and she ran into this guy, Anthony Lee. I believe it was Anthony Lee who she ran into originally. He is presently, I believe, her manager or one of her main managers. But at this time, I believe he was kind of just in small local-ish bands or like on the road traveling, like trying to make it in the music industry. Funny enough, he used to be in this band called Action Item. And I actually saw them in concert back in like when I was in high school. They played at this venue called Mojo's in Joliet, Illinois. Or was it at Mojo's that I saw them? No, it was at House of Blues in Chicago. I think I did see them at Mojo's as well. But in Chicago, they played the House of Blues, and I even actually met them. And at the time, I had a crush on Anthony Lee out of all the members of the band. And I probably won't find it for this video, but at some point I'll put up a picture. But there is a picture of me standing right next to Anthony Lee. So look at that, just a few degrees of separation. He's now Halsey's manager. But basically, Halsey has talked about her rise of fame, that she was outside smoking a cigarette at some like bar or like venue or something. Anthony Lee comes outside and like it sounds like they strike up a conversation. He thinks she's like a really like cool girl and stuff like that. She's kind of like showing off and like putting on this persona that she's a little bit more confident than she is. And he kind of asks her like, so what do you do? Like to ask, you know, where she's kind of going in life. And I think at this time she's maybe 17, 18, 19, maybe more in the 17 or 18 range. But she kind of just like bluffs it and says that she makes music. And he's like, oh, cool. Like what kind of music and stuff like that. And it sounds like this conversation kind of sparks her to either go public with like some of the music she was already working on or to start taking that more seriously. So Halsey ends up putting out a couple of songs on SoundCloud, one of which goes like viral almost overnight. I believe it was her song Ghost. And that is a song from the Badlands era. And from there, it sounds like her success kind of takes off. So it's like, it sounds like Halsey was kind of dabbling in like in the music industry, but it wasn't like necessarily like she woke up and like from a young age was like, I want to be a singer. She's always been a phenomenal like artist in terms of like painting, sketching, things like that. She also writes amazing poetry. So I just think Halsey has so many skills. I don't know that she specifically narrowed it down to singing. But obviously she's had to go through a lot and, you know, her life has transformed in many ways. I'm sure she's loved the success of becoming a famous pop star, but also too, like think of the pressures of Hollywood and on top of everything else she was going through personally. Next line I wanted to bring up from this first song, and then hopefully we can move on to song number 2. She says, I don't know what I did to have this fate. I'm drenched in it. And again, I think that just echoes like how much she's been through. So I'm not going to beat a dead horse on that point. She says, my special talent isn't writing. It's not singing. It's feeling everything that everyone alive feels every day. And so I think this is where she's like kind of even internalized people making fun of her singing and her songwriting, which truly breaks my heart because I hope by the end of this video to prove to you that she is fucking phenomenal with songwriting, as well as singing. I think Halsey has an absolutely beautiful fucking voice, and people can make fun of that. I think they're just jealous. But she definitely does feel a lot of stuff. You can definitely tell that Halsey is an empath. You know, she isn't afraid to go to very dark places with her song lyrics. And again, that's something that I've always very much appreciated about her. It's kind of what's also drawn me to Sylvia Plath over the years and like other different artists and writers. I think there are some people in this world that just for their own valid reasons are uncomfortable talking about really deep stuff and want to keep things light. But I think there can also be something so validating about speaking or talking with someone who like isn't afraid to be very blunt about how dark life can be. And so I've always felt like Halsey not only feels everything, but she can use her talents of writing to make you feel understood or make you feel like you're less alone. And so just saying that to say like, Halsey, thank you for creating this space for me to feel less depressed by myself with you. She says, I think I'm special because I cut myself wide open as if it's honorable to bleed. I kind of take this lyric to mean that she used to think that she was impressive because she would be so edgy and talk about like wanting to die or being depressed. And now she kind of feels like she's backtracking a little bit because now she's at this place where she doesn't know if she's going to live or die. And so she's kind of saying like, what was I thinking? Thinking that it was honorable to bleed, thinking that it was impressive to want to die when here I am now and like I'm fucking terrified of dying. Which again, very real thing. You know, I think a lot of us who have been depressed, like if you've ever been in a situation where like maybe things are starting to get better or God forbid, like you're depressed, but something life-threatening happens to you. It kind of shocks you sometimes to realize, like, not for everyone, but like in my experience, sometimes it's like, oh, wow, like, no, I actually do want to be here. And like, it shocks you how much existential dread you can have when like at some times you can also like very much be like not want to be here. So I thought, again, that was very relatable of her to name that. She says, but I'm not lucky, which I feel like is just a call to her single Lucky that comes much later in the album. She says, but I'm not lucky and I know I wasn't chosen. The world keeps spinning without me. So again, she's about to possibly pass away. Her label is kind of putting this pressure on her to say like, you better get this album out, or like the last one didn't do so well. I don't know if you can sell things out. And so she's kind of thinking to herself, like, if I don't like, if I don't survive, like, the world's gonna keep spinning. Like, even though I was this big pop star, like, at the end of the day, like, I am small and I am human just like everyone else. She says, I told my mother I would die by 27, and in a way, I sort of did. If you know about the term 27 Club, it's basically this idea that a lot of famous people who have passed away from overdoses or drug abuse typically don't make it past 27. So it's called the 27 Club. And so I assume that, Halsey landed on that number either because of her past drug use or just like because she had friends who passed away around that age. And she's saying, in a way, I sort of did die. And I don't know if she's talking about like her career dying. I can't remember if she was around 27 when her last album came out. I don't know if this is when she started to get her diagnosis. I don't know if this is when like she became a mother and she's like making a joke of like, my life's over. Like, now I'm living for my kid versus like it being all about me. So who knows? But that's where I took that lyric. She says, this thing I love has grown demanding and obsessive, and it wants more than I can give. So I think back to how Halsey's fans put a lot of pressure on her to come out and speak up about things using her platform, which I think, like, I can see both sides of it. I think it's fair to want individuals with a platform and more resources to utilize that for good and to help more vulnerable communities. So I can see that side of it. At the same time, like, I've always kind of held space of like, celebrities are people too, and we don't really know what's going on personally. And especially how after her periods of silence, she really came out about like her cancer diagnosis and shared truly how shitty life was. I just think I can understand that she's like, yeah, this life I've led of being so public, it's become demanding and obsessive, and I just can't give that right now. Then at the very end of the song, there is kind of like a big like breakdown with a lot of like drums and sounds to kind of like close out the song. And one thing that I thought was adorable is her little boy, whose name is Ender. I want to say he's 3 or 4 now, but at the very end, you hear him saying, "Let's go!" And he's like so excited. And I just thought that like, wow, what a joyful little way to end this song that's like clearly so depressive. She's kind of just like talking about like, I don't know if I'm gonna like live or not, but I kind of feel like isolated in LA as it is. Like, the song is literally called The Only Living Girl in LA. So yeah, that's track 1. All right, track 2. I don't have as many notes for this one, but this is probably like one of my top favorite songs of this entire album. This song is called Ego. This is one of the singles that's been put out for the album. If you watched the MTV VMAs, I think it was, Halsey did perform this on stage. There's a music video that I think she directed all on her own that I think is fantastic, so go watch that on YouTube. Ego, I would say, is giving the vibes of like early 2000s like pop punk. Like when you'd watch like Cheaper by the Dozen or any of those like rom-com like feel-good 2000s movies, and you'd have like the scene with, I don't know, like a little fight scene, and you'd have like a Simple Plan song playing in the background. Like Ego reminds me of kind of one of those kind of vibes. And the first note I put is on and on and on, yeah. Like, it reminds me of the Freaky Friday song. It's like, don't want to go out. If you know the song, sing it with me. But she's talking about kind of feeling suicidal. She says lyrics like, I think that I should try to kill my ego, because if I don't, my ego might kill me. And so it makes me think about, again, her label maybe putting pressure on her to saying like, your last album didn't do so well. You can't sell out these stadiums. I could understand if like your own personal ego kind of gets to you, because leading up to Halsey's previous album, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power, she even had a lyric in that album that said like, I don't need a fucking introduction. And it was basically saying like, I've been around so long in the music scene, like, I don't need to give you guys singles for this album. Like, I've established myself enough. Like, I don't need a fucking introduction. And so she didn't really have singles for that album. Truly, I don't think she needed to. I think that album's a fucking masterpiece, but you have to be in the headspace for expecting, like, an alternative, like, vibe from her. If you're going into that album looking for, like, Hope Was Found in Kingdom 2.0 with like Bad at Love type songs, you're going to be a little bit disappointed, but that doesn't mean it's not great art. So I can understand if her ego's like, Halsey, if we can't pull this together, like maybe we should die, kind of thing. Like I could, not that I think she's being that literal with it, but I think that's kind of what she's speaking to, of like, my ego's falling apart. So maybe I should like humble myself, because if I don't get this ego under control, like I'm just going to feel like I can't accept that like my career's like a little bit downward, if that makes sense. She says things like, I wake up tired, think I'm better off dead. Again, trying to undergo treatment for cancer and things like that. I've heard it's, obviously I can't speak to it. I have never been through it myself. I've had loved ones who have gone through it, but it seems like a very draining, very fatiguing thing. So I don't know if this is talking about tired in that sense, but she says like, I think I'm better off dead. And again, looking at all the stuff she's been through and like how much pressure she's getting from the outside world of like her fans not understanding, or like she references a lot in here that like she doesn't have many people in Hollywood checking in on her. She's also had strained relationships with her family. Like look around and like what is there to live for other than like continuing to make money and like obviously her son and things like that. But I just have a lot of empathy for Halsey. She's going through a lot. She talks about feeling lost in this song. She says, I'm nervous what you'll think of me now. I'm hoping that someone comes around and helps me figure it out. When she says, I'm nervous what you'll think of me now, I'm thinking that she's talking about either the wider public or her fans in general. She's been on a hiatus. She is coming out with this album where she's being very candid about what has been going on. But because she hasn't been as active with her fans, I could see her being like, I don't know if you guys are going to accept this album. I don't know if you guys will like the style of this music, or if you'll have moved on to the next, you know, Chappell Roan or Olivia Rodrigo, right? I think something we don't talk about a lot in the music industry is that like, especially as artists become older, you know, like there are plenty of people waiting to take those spots for like the main pop stars. And so if you take that hiatus, you take that risk and you just hope that like your fans will kind of come back to you. Then she also talks about, I'm all grown up, but I'm so not lately. I'm acting like a fucking baby and I'm really not as happy as I seem. Nothing's as it seems. And whenever she says like nothing's as it seems, I feel like that's kind of like a little like circus callback vibe, like nothing's as it seems, like as if you're going into like a Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of like optical illusion place. She says, still a little kid that can't make friends, want to be invited but I won't attend. Real. I feel you, Halsey. I've been having bad dreams my career could end because I slipped up when I could have played pretend. I don't know what specifically she's referencing here, but my guess is there was a point in time when Halsey's fans were putting so much pressure on her, some of them, and were, you know, kind of demanding that Halsey come out and speak on certain political events, that Halsey ended up putting out a statement, I think it was on her Instagram story, where she kind of just said like, hey, I know I used to be more politically like vocal on my platform. However, I have a family. I have a child to protect now. And she said something along the lines of like, it's risky for me to like talk about these political events because I could get death threats. I could get, you know, people taking action against me. And you don't really know what that's like. You don't really know the consequences of that. And she basically was kind of clapping back and saying like, I don't have to come out and talk about this stuff. And I can have valid reasons for that. From what I recall, her fans that were demanding her to talk did not take that well. Go figure, right? I felt like she shouldn't have even, personally, I was like, I don't think she should have even had to tell us anything. It felt like it was kind of out of resentment for people talking so much about this. But I assume that that's what she's talking about when she says, my career could end because I slipped up when I could have played pretend. Like, I imagine maybe she didn't get the best reception from her manager or her team after she put out that statement. And she's kind of maybe having a regret and saying, I could have played pretend. Like, I could have just been like all of these other influencers who just never address anything. Rob Beauty Christie. Colleen Ballinger. Right. I know that she's not talking about those YouTubers, but if you got the reference, you got the reference. So yeah, that's what I think she's referencing there. She writes, voices all came crashing down and said, you're too nice to run this town. So that makes me think like maybe her label or her team was kind of like, okay, you can't make statements like that anymore. You're too nice, basically saying like, you can't be making statements like that. You're going to risk our profits at this record label. So Halsey, you can't make statements like that again. Again, I don't know, but that's my interpretation. Last one before we go on to track 3. She says, I want to go back to the beginning when it all felt right. A rooftop, Lower East Side, I'm singing. Didn't give a fuck if I was winning. It's all done now, so who am I kidding? I'm doing way worse than I'm admitting. A lot to unpack there. She's kind of saying, you know, I wish when I was still just on the Lower East Side. I don't know if that's a reference to her song with Benny Blanco that's the song East Side. You might know that one from the radio. But she did come from the East Coast, again, New Jersey native, so she could just be referencing where she grew up. But she said in the past she didn't give a fuck if she was winning. She was just kind of making art, not to like sell a certain amount of, you know, seats in a arena or sell a certain amount of records. So she wishes when it was back to just kind of creating, it sounds like, but she's like, it's all done now, so who am I kidding? Like, why even, you know, regret that? Like, she's kind of almost saying she's at the end of her career. I don't know, that's the interpretation I take when she says it's all done now, because what's done? Halsey, you could still have a huge career ahead of you. That's all I'm going to say on Ego. Again, one of my favorite tracks. I wish selfishly, if I could make my own dream Halsey album, I would have a whole album full of like Ego style stuff. So Halsey, if you're listening, I'd love to see that, but I will take literally anything and everything from you. So that's just my personal preference if I could be selfish. Track 3, Dog Years. This is more of like a toned down, chiller, kind of like slower song. Only Girl Alive in LA County was more of like a acoustic, like just strumming a guitar in the middle of like the street kind of thing vibe. Ego is more of that pop punky song. She sings, they said I have a universal blood type I can give to anyone in need, which I think is like O positive or O negative. I don't know if someone's in like nursing school or stuff like that, let me know what the universal blood type is. But she writes, yeah, I have a universal blood type I can give to anyone in need, but only receive with somebody exactly like me. So this is kind of like, it sounds like a reality for Halsey, but kind of a metaphor for her life. Like, she has this blood type where she can truly give to anyone and everyone, but she can only receive it from someone that's exactly like her. I feel like that's a metaphor for her being able to feel everything that everyone feels all the time, but also feeling so alone. Like, she can feel everything and validate other people's feelings, but who's there around to validate hers? It's also kind of ironic. She's been through so much. It's kind of like, oh, of course I have the universal blood type. And, you know, it's very rare for me to find a good match. If you're a person that lives with chronic illness, I bet you can relate to this on some level. You know, like, just like, of course my health is like this. Of course my body is like this, you know? So I just wanted to point that out. She says, and I'm trying to be positive, but oh, it's really hard. I'm a loner, I'm a loser, why don't you shoot me in the yard? She's kind of talking about like how hopeless it feels in her stage of health right now. So she's like, why don't you just shoot me? Like, let's just get this over with if I'm gonna be suffering like this. She says, put me down like a lame horse and send me to the farm where all the dogs go. I've been a really good dog, can I come inside? Yeah, I've been such a good girl, can we go for a ride? I'm on a real short leash, but I like it tight. You know, I'm such a sweet girl, but I can really bite. So she's kind of saying like, can I please live? She's almost like going between like begging, can I come inside? Can we go for a ride? I'm on a real short leash, but I like it tight. She's kind of saying like, yeah, like life's risky right now, but I do kind of like living on the edge of risk. She says, I'm such a sweet girl, but I can really bite. So yes, I can be sweet, but I can also have that edgy side. Then she says, because my dog died last year, he fell asleep in my embrace, and the very last thing I told him was see you soon and we can race. So in addition to everything else I've named that Halsey's been through, she also lost her dog. And I believe her dog was only like 4 or 5 years old. Like, she didn't have that dog very long. I remember kind of first seeing the dog when she was still dating G-Eazy back in like 2016 or 2017, I want to say. I think the dog was just a puppy at that age. And it sounds like he died from some kind of health complication. I don't know if Halsey's ever come out and said, but she's very candid here and just says like, my dog died last year. He fell asleep in my embrace, which I can't even imagine. That sounds so heartbreaking. But the very last thing she told him was see you soon and we can race. So that makes me wonder if Halsey knew at that time about her cancer diagnosis yet, or if she even had a prognosis, because to tell your dog see you soon and we can race, like, such a heartbreaking thing. But it just makes me wonder where her state of mind was at that time. Like, did she really think she was going to die and like see the dog soon again? Or was it just kind of one of those soothing things she wanted to tell the dog before he fell asleep? Then she said, you know, a mercy kill is what I seek. I didn't ask to live, but dying is up to me, which we'll kind of get into what that means later. The next song that we'll be talking about is this song, Letter to God. Halsey has 3 songs on this album called Letter to God, but they have different years next to them. And she's kind of treating them as like transition songs on this album. So like you'll have, 2 or 3 like full length songs, and then you'll have these Letter to God songs that are like more like a minute or 2 minutes long. So they're slightly shorter, but they're kind of transitioning you from like, part 1 of the album to part 2 of the album to part 3 of the album. And it's all kind of like the same exact song, but in different like lyrics and almost different stages. So basically I'm saying like, when she says, I didn't ask to live, but dying is up to me, it's kind of calling to what those songs are going to be about. Because in a lot of the letters to God, she's talking about going from being a very depressed young kid who wished to die to now being in the state where like actually your life's getting better and you actually want to live. So she's saying, I didn't ask to live, I didn't ask to be here, but dying is up to me. If I say I want to die, it should be when I'm feeling like that depressed and really want to end my life. It's up to me. It's not up to God, or it's not up to my body. It's not up to whoever. Like, I want to have control over that. Which is obviously like naive. None of us have that control, but it's like just that protesting of it all. She says, well, they say all dogs go to heaven, but what about a bitch? Because, right, she would be a female dog, which is a bitch. What about an evil girl that's lying in a ditch? Tell the 3 people who ask that I'm in a better place, right? So how fucking blunt is that? She's feeling kind of abandoned. She's feeling like she doesn't have any friends in Hollywood or friends maybe personally that are checking in on her. So she's like, I don't know if I'm going to go to heaven or not, but tell the people who ask that I'm in a better place. So that is track 3. Track 4 is that first Letter to God. This is 1974. It showcases how sensitive and emotionally aware Halsey is at a very young age. She says, I don't want to go to grandma's, so I'm quiet on the drive. I saw a deer that must have gotten hit. It made me start to cry. So she sees this dead deer on the road and she's already so empathetic that she's crying. And she says to herself, did it have a mom and dad? And do they argue just like mine? So she's feeling compassion for this deer about not only its dying, but she's also wondering, like, did this deer have parents and did they not get along? So she's already perceiving and internalizing her parents' own problems there. You hear her say, did he want to be a grown-up? Talking about this deer. So clearly this letter to God is from the perspective of her truly as like a young child. She then says, there was a boy I went to school with who had leukemia at 5. His parents gave him everything. They'd never yell or fight, right? So this person's parents are coping by trying to get along because their son has leukemia. She says, they'd never make him cut his hair because they're happy he survived. So this little boy survives leukemia, and now he has like this freedom to just kind of be loved by his parents. They're not fighting. They're not even trying to control him in any way. They're just truly happy that he's still there. So there's this like feeling of like, you're welcome here. We love you kind of thing. She says, he didn't have to clean his room. It was enough to be alive. When I was little, I was jealous. So I would say a prayer at night. Well, I'd say, please God, I want to be sick, but I don't want to hurt, so get it over with quick. Please God, I want to be loved. I don't want to be somebody they're trying to get rid of. And so basically, it sounds like Halsey had a rough home life, which she's talked about. She sees her parents fighting all the time. She even has to go to grandma's, which is insinuating either, she's got 2 working parents, so someone else has to watch her. Or maybe her parents need a break from her for a little bit, which is understandable. Parenting is a lot. But she's internalizing this as a kid. She's kind of like assuming she's kind of being sent away. And she's jealous of this little boy whose parents are not fighting in comparison to hers, and are also like just happy to love him and welcome him because he survived. It sounds like she's not getting those kinds of vibes from her parents, which might not be for any like reason of their own. Her parents could be very stressed. Her parents could have their own mental health issues. Like, we don't know that extent of it, but it's like the only way as a kid that she can make sense of this and feel like she can break out of that is like wishing to be sick, because in her kid's mind, she thinks like, oh, well, if I just get sick, that's going to make my parents stop fighting. That's going to make them love me more. So it's this naive like mindset, but she's like praying to God and wishing that like she could get, sick, but she's saying like, don't make it hurt, like get it over with quick, because even though she's a little kid and asking for this, she's asking for it for the benefits, not for the actual experience, obviously. I want to be loved. I don't want to be someone they're trying to get rid of. Like how heartbreaking that as a little kid, she felt like she was someone that they were trying to get rid of. Like, oh, my heart just goes out for her. Track 5, Panic Attack. This is more of Halsey's like 70s vibes. It feels like a good like 70s like popish song kind of thing. She says, my body carries sadness that my brain cannot yet see, and I've been holding on to memories in my stomach and my teeth. What I think about here is how when we experience trauma, sometimes mentally we feel like, okay, like I'm over it. Like it didn't make me that upset. I didn't cry very much. But sometimes like it literally gets stored in our bodies where like for example, maybe I was in like a really traumatic like car crash or something like that, and I survived and I'm okay. But then, a few years later, I'm driving in the snow and my car starts to like spin in a certain direction or like lose a little bit of control because it's slippery. My body or my nervous system might like grasp onto that and recognize it and like code how I'm feeling as very similar to how I felt in that car crash. And I could start all of a sudden getting into a panic attack or like having some kind of like very visceral response in my body that's basically indicating, oh, no, my body is not over that. Like maybe mentally or emotionally, I feel over it, but there's a part of me that's still carrying that sadness that, as Halsey says, it's carrying this sadness that my brain cannot yet see. I've been holding on to memories in my stomach and my teeth. So it's kind of like, I assume when she talks about holding memories in her teeth, it's like I'm holding memories that I don't even talk about, right? Because where else would you be holding it in your teeth there? Or maybe something happened traumatic to her that involves like that part of her body. And I'm holding on to memories in my stomach, right? Like a lot of us, our stomach drops when like something shocking happens. Next lyric, she says, and I think you're a danger to myself, or so it seems. Is it love or a panic attack? She asks that a lot in like the lyrics. It reminds me of when Halsey was talking about her song Without Me. It was either Without Me or Graveyard. Maybe it was Graveyard. There's a line in Graveyard on her album Manic that says, it's funny how the warning signs can feel like they're butterflies. And she talked about how after she had broken up with her partner G-Eazy, who she dated like years and years and years ago, that one of the things that pulled her into that relationship was feeling like all these butterflies in her stomach when she would be around him. And after talking with her mom about it more, she came to this realization that like sometimes what she thought was butterflies was really just like warning signs from her nervous system saying this isn't safe. So I kind of feel like Halsey's coming back to the space of like, is this love or is this a panic attack? Like I'm feeling something, but I can't tell if this is a good thing or if I'm going down that old path of like actually getting warning signs that I'm like ignoring. She's talking about how she's kind of experiencing a new love and she's nervous about those feelings. For example, one of her lyrics says, would you mind if I asked you on the phone? And the other person kind of responds to her and says, I don't know, but it's late, so I'm taking you home. So she's kind of nervously saying, like, would you mind if I like shared this with you or told you about this? And, Halsey's kind of talking to herself, like in a kind of callback lyric format where she's like asking this. And then she says, I don't know, but it's late, so I'm taking you home. Then I wrote down, she has a lyric that says, I had to call the doctor, left a note on his machine because I tripped when we went walking and I felt it in my spleen. And now I think I need a blood test or an antihistamine because you make me fucking nervous and I don't know what it means. And I think you're a danger to my health, or so it seems. So she's basically saying like, as this love is developing, she's feeling like more and more of these signs that like it's really impacting her. I'm walking with you and I feel it in my spleen. I think I need a blood test or an antihistamine. She's basically saying like, I'm having too many feelings, like something must be wrong. And so it's hard to tell like if she's entering a relationship that is actually having warning signs or if like she's just actually falling in love again and is just feeling like, oh my God, this is too good to be true. She says, my spirit has been broken. My optimism's getting sore. which again, with everything going on in Halsey's life, it's amazing she even has optimism at this point, because I would be pretty down and out. She says, and I would love to love you, but my body's keeping score, and I don't know if I can see you anymore. And then the song ends with, is it love? Like just being like said over and over and over again. And so, yeah, you're just kind of left on this space there. And I don't know which partner she's kind of referencing as her muse for this song, but I have to imagine maybe it's Avon Joyga, if I'm pronouncing his name right. He is very famous for having been on Nickelodeon, I think on the show either Sam and Cat or some show with Ariana Grande on it. I wasn't as much of a Nickelodeon stan, so I didn't watch that show very much, but I'm guessing that Panic Attack is about meeting him for the first time, but who knows? Doesn't really matter. Next track is The End. This is a very slow, sad song from the album, and this is a song that's kind of talking about, like, again, really feeling like you're facing the end of your life and feeling scared about what that means, and really wondering, like, who's going to be there for me as I really possibly stare down death's door. So she says something like, every couple of years now, a doctor says I'm sick, pulls out a brand new bag of tricks, and then they lay it on me. Which again, if you are a person watching this who has ever dealt with a chronic illness, you are like, yep, I felt that in my bones, right? That idea of like, all my labs are coming back clean, but like there's something wrong with me. Going to doctor after doctor and describing your symptoms and either not being believed or not being able to really get to the bottom of it because everything is like coming back, you know, normal. Or like you go to doctor after doctor and one person wants to say, oh, you have this. And the other person's like, no, it's this. And it can just be very complicated. So she's just kind of talking about that. Then she says, and at first it was my brain. Like at first they said there was something wrong mentally. Maybe she's talking about her bipolar diagnosis. Then a skeleton in pain. So then they told her it was her body that was having a lot of pain. Then she says, and I don't like to complain, but I'm saying sorry. When I met you, I thought I was damaged goods, had a fucked up childhood, and there's poison in my brain and in my blood. So I don't know who she's apologizing for. I don't know if it's her partner. I don't know if it's just the world at large, but she's saying, I'm sorry. I thought I was damaged goods. I've had a bad childhood, and I thought that there was poison in my brain and blood because she's gotten all these diagnoses. So perhaps this was a song that's written by the time that Halsey finds out that she's actually going to survive her cancer, because obviously Halsey's still here, but who knows? Then she says, if you knew it was the end of the world, could you love me like a child? Could you hold me in the dark? If you knew it was the end of the world, would you like to stay a while? Or would you leave when it gets hard? So again, she's kind of asking, like, are you going to be here for me or not? Like, she's testing either her newest partner or someone else in her life. She's being very vulnerable in saying that. She says, finally see the doctor, told him I'm not bitter because I finally found a lover who's better for my liver so I can finally recover. So it sounds like in the past, Halsey would date individuals with different like substance abuse issues, and whoever she's seeing at this time, it sounds like is not a drinker. And so because she can, you know, not drink as much as well, she feels like she can recover more from the conditions that she's trying to move past. Then she says, and I told him he could stay right where he stood, but I don't know if he should, because once my God destroys the flesh, then there's the flood. So I'm not sure if she's referencing this towards like her partner who's now entered her life. She's saying like he can stay, but I don't know if he should stay, because once God destroys the flesh, then there's the flood. So she's kind of saying like, if things are getting better right now, there's going to be a flood at some point. So I don't know if you should stay with me because some shoe is going to drop. That's how I take that. She talks about building an ark together with this person to survive the flood and the end of the world. She says, and in the water, so the floods come, and she's saying, in the water, there's a doctor who didn't listen to my claim. What a shame, he's circling the drain. Like if you and I are in this together and we're building this ark and it's the end of the world, yeah, we'll be together, but we're not taking this doctor with us who wanted to dismiss my claims, which I say good for her.
Clap if you've ever wanted to kill somebody.
When I met you, I said I would never die, but the joke was always mine, because I'm racing against time. So she kind of said, like, at first when I met you, I was so like egotistical or confident that I was saying, oh, I'm never gonna die, like my legacy is gonna live forever. But I was always joking because I knew I was racing against time. I know it's not the end of the world, but could you pick me up at 8 because my treatment starts today? So again, this song kind of starts out like with not a lot of hope, but I get the sense that she knew that things were going to get better, especially because it ends and says, you know, my treatment is starting. So at least there's like a way out. It's not the end of the world. Moving to track 7, she has a song called I Believe in Magic. This song is a very sweet song. It's also one of my favorites. I think it really showcases Halsey's like vocal range, and it's a very sweet, almost lullaby to her son. She says, my son is almost 3. He used to look just like his dad, but right now he looks just like me. And as far as I can see, the fruit I bear is sweet, but the apple's rolling real far from the tree, falling down the hill, so full of love and so carefree. So she's just admiring her son getting older, how he's starting to remind her of her more, and how she can see elements of herself in him, but that he's also growing up, and he's so lovable and so carefree. Then she says, I wonder if the world will treat him any better than it treated me. So she's feeling kind of protective of sending him out into the world. I don't know if that's because, you know, he's the son of a famous artist, or just in general, because Halsey has talked about being bullied, not being accepted, feeling alone. And so she's kind of like, is he going to be cursed to that as well, because the apple is not falling far from the tree? She says, please tell my boy I love him so. Please tell the world I have to grow before I go, and I just wanted you to know. So again, this is one of those songs where like I can't tell if Halsey knew she was going to recover or not yet. She's saying, tell my boy I love him, like almost like tell him I love him as I'm sitting on my deathbed. Or when she says, please tell the world I have to grow before I go. I think that's her kind of saying, like, tell the world when you put out this album that like I wanted to talk about this process, or I wanted to talk about my life and how it's changed. So it's just sad for me because I think it really talks about the reality of how Halsey didn't know if she was going to really be alive for this album. So I'm just very grateful that she is healthy and she is still here, but it just really hits home, you know? Then the chorus says, because I believe in magic and I believe in sin. I think when she's talking about believing in magic, she's talking about the magic of actually being able to get pregnant and healthily have a child, her child Ender. Given that she has endometriosis, Halsey's also talked about child loss that she has experienced through health issues. So she considered Ender, her son, to kind of be her rainbow baby. So I think that's what she's referencing when she says, like, I believe in magic because magic kind of happened. I was able to get pregnant and I was able to have my son. But she's also saying, I believe in sin. Like, I think the way I interpret it is that she's like, well, I did get this magic, but there was also the karma of like sin. Like now I'm being punished for my sins or something like that. Again, who knows if that's what she means, but that's the interpretation I took. She says, I still believe in heaven if they'll never let me in. So she's still holding out hope that there is something better out there if she does pass. She says, started to believe in love the day I met my little twin. So she finally felt like she could truly love very deeply the day that she met her son. I think I might start trying because I haven't been. I think because Halsey was so depressed and had been through so much in her life, she didn't always have that specific purpose to really keep trying. I think she even sometimes didn't love herself enough to kind of keep trying. That's how I interpret this, because she's saying, you know, I think I might start trying now because I haven't been. That's the way that I make sense of like why she hadn't before, and why now that she has her little twin, why she feels more motivated to start trying. Then there's a little bit of Ender talking to her before the next verse. It's just fucking adorable. You have to go listen to it. In the second verse, Halsey talks about, she says, my mama's getting old, talking about her own mother. Well, it's contagious and you'll catch it like a cold. She won't admit it, but it's something that I know, because every year that passes for me passes her 100-fold. So she's just kind of reminiscing on like how quickly her own, like Halsey's own son is growing up, because, you know, from baby to like 3 or 4, like you change so much. And also too, Halsey's, I believe, 29. And I don't know how old her mother is, but I want to say at least like 20 years older. And I believe currently her mom is also undergoing a cancer diagnosis, believe it or not. I don't know what the stages of that, but I believe Halsey talked about that semi-recently. So she's kind of reminiscing on like how every year that passes my mom 100-fold. And just like the complexities of like being a parent and also having an aging parent and just kind of growing up ourselves. It's just a lot of complexity. Then she says, back in the day, my dad and I would share a laugh at all of her mistakes, like her and her dad would laugh at her mom. And then Halsey says, but that alliance didn't save me from her fate. No, I didn't last till 28, became a single mom, just crushed under the weight of a child growing faster than I can take. I love him anyway. So she's kind of saying, even though I was naive and used to laugh with my dad at my mom and maybe even like, you know, blame my mom for her being kind of like a single mom, like that alliance didn't save me from her fate. I ended up kind of just like her. So Halsey's kind of being humbled for kind of being a naive kid that felt like, oh, that's not going to happen to me. I would never let that happen. Then the last note I have for this song is she says, and I realize that there will come a time when he sees me turn gray. She's realizing that her son, Ender, is going to eventually see her turn gray. And realizes it's too late, like I did with my mother. So she's feeling regretful already for like maybe taking too long to really appreciate her own mom. And so she says, so now I tell her to her face. So she's working on developing a better and healthier relationship with her mom, especially after this journey. Honestly, my voice was getting tired from talking so long. I'm definitely gonna have to edit this video a little bit, but if you're still here with me, thank you. Let's pick back up with track 8, which is now the second version of Letter to God. So the last version we got on track 4 was in 1974. This Letter to God is for 1983, so that's 9 years later. The sound for this one is more of like 70s or 80s, almost like rock sound. So it's a little bit older, probably meant to be more like the 80s since it's dated for 83. But it almost like sounds like a song about being kind of on the road and about to go on stage and perform kind of vibes. She says, I left home and went to Brooklyn where my boyfriend had a place. And he had track marks on his arms, but had the most angelic face. So she's talking about, I think, the time when Halsey starts writing like her EP. I think it's Room 93 is the name of that EP. Or the Badlands era. So she's gone from like that meeting with Anthony Lee that I talked about. Her song has gone viral on SoundCloud. She also is getting very popular on Tumblr, if you know that social media platform, which was very big in the 2010s. Halsey went viral for a poem that she wrote about you were red and you loved me because I was blue, but you've touched me and suddenly I was a lilac sky. If you were on the Tumblr app or website a lot during the 2010s, you might have come across that poem that is in Halsey's song Colors, but basically it's around this time where she's kind of describing where her life is now at in this letter to God compared to like being a little kid. So she's in Brooklyn. Remember that New York reference I talked about for like where Halsey got her stage name. She's living with a boyfriend. He is abusing drugs, talking about track marks on the arms, but he had the most angelic face. So she's in love with this person, but also can see that like he's struggling too. Then I made a note that she says, I watched my friends die before 21 and now I'm 28. I'm at the doctor's every day because I can't stop losing weight. So it sounds like this track is written when Halsey is getting like her cancer diagnosis or like maybe is in the middle of like exploring treatment options, because she's talking about, you know, a lot of friends of hers dying before the age of 21. She's made it past them to 28, but now she's kind of facing like possibly the end of her life. And she's seeing multiple doctors because she can't stop losing weight. That'll come up again in another song in the album, the losing weight comment. She says, and now I'm the one with needles in my arms and my legs. I'm making jokes about my blood tests and I'm planning my estate. So she's like taking a very dark humor approach of like, even though my other friends died of overdoses, I'm the one now that has needles in my arms for all these different like treatments. And the joke about the blood test, we saw that in the dog year song earlier when I talked about being able to give blood to everyone but only receive to someone exactly like her. And planning my estate, she's planning her will in the event that she literally passes away. Then I made a note, she says, and I don't want to blame the child, but I have to speculate. And this is where Halsey starts to tie together the old letter to God to this one. She says, I don't want to blame the child, but I have to speculate if this could all just be an answer to those prayers that came delayed. So when she was a kid, right, she's praying to be sick so that she can feel loved, because that's like how the child is perceiving why that one boy with leukemia got love from his parents. So she's saying, am I now getting that prayer answered? And when I turned 28, she said, because I never would have said it if I knew I had to wait until the moment I was happy, then it all disintegrates. So she's saying, finally, I'm happy. I have my son. I'm at peace with like my career, or like I'm finally starting to feel happy with the person that she talks about in Panic Attack, right? She's talking about feeling all that love for him. And like we see Ender already in so many of Halsey's songs. But she's like, it really had to happen right when I'm starting to feel happy. And then she sings the same like outro chorus that was in the old letter to God by saying, this is like when it almost sounds in the song like Halsey is truly coming on stage and like performing this song. So it's like not only centering you at like what part of Halsey's life that she's reflecting on, but again, I also think it's so cool that you can take the exact same song that at first was like a very private, like child's thoughts in the first version of Letter to God, to here having it be Letter to God, and like she's starting to like open herself up to the world as like a pop star because her career's like taking off at this period. So she says it again, you know, the same refrain. It's, please God, I don't want to be sick. So now she's saying, I don't want to be sick. And I don't want to hurt, so get it over with quick. So she's still saying, I don't want to hurt. Let me like cut this short if I have to be in pain. Please God, I want to be loved. Don't want to be somebody that you're trying to get rid of. So now she's kind of saying like, God, don't get rid of me. Like she's praying to God, and she's also saying like, please don't feel like you need to get rid of me. Like she feels like that punishment, kind of like the sin that we talked about in I Believe in Magic, just the track before. So that was Letter to God part 2. Again, brilliant in my opinion to be able to like take a transition song on an album and like just differentiate the style and everything. Again, the Great Impersonator. Track 9 is Hometown. This is definitely like a country vibe. Halsey did, I think it was on Vivo, different performances of songs from this album, one of them being Hometown. If you haven't seen it, but you want to like actually listen to this song, but maybe not like stream the album, which why would you do that? You're crazy. This is a great album. If I haven't convinced you yet, what are you waiting for? That's just my little Halsey stand moment there. But yeah, track 9, Hometown, it's kind of country, and the way she performs it in the Vivo video, it's kind of like in a diner like stage setting, and she's just like in the booth as like dressed as like a waitress and singing it, and I just think it's very well done, so go check that out. But here's what I made note of from this song. She opens it by saying, Davy died in the summertime in a hot box car with a seatbelt around his neck and a needle in his arm. So she's talking about a friend of hers who basically died of an overdose in his car. She then says, I bought a couple of grams of weed off of him, but so did all the cops back then. The kids from all the county, we'd walk out in the heat along the train tracks with our paper bags and gravel in our feet. So she's again describing her upbringing in New Jersey. She was, you know, smoking, hanging out with her friends, and they would just kind of like hang out outside because it sounds like Halsey kind of grew up like lower middle class, if not like lower class. It sounds like money was hard. I think that kind of shows up in like the fighting that like Halsey references in like an earlier song, and just what I think she's named in like past interviews and things like that. So she's just talking about how like when you guys don't have a lot of money and it's the summer, like all you guys can really do is like walk around in the heat and, you know, have your lunch with you and just make the most of it. The next thing I made a note of is it says, in our heads we pick the husbands from the 100 men we knew, but I kissed the poster of a pop star and checked my breasts in case they grew, which I thought was like such a funny play on words to like tie that whole first like verse together. But it also is kind of like speaking to Halsey's like gender sexuality and like even gender like fluidity. I know in the past she's like identified with she, they pronouns. I don't think that's been updated, but correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but she's kind of talking about like kissing the poster of a pop star, which I think like she leaves it open to kind of either being, you know, the Jonas Brothers or something like that, like, because they were technically pop stars, or like Backstreet Boys. But pop star could also mean like, you know, well, Taylor Swift, she would have been like just coming up at the time that Halsey would have been in high school, but like, I don't know, like Beyonce or like whoever was like big at that time. It just keeps that kind of open. And yeah, it's just like talking about her upbringing there. She then says, for the chorus, it says, "There ain't a reason on this earth I'd go back to my hometown. Somewhere in the clouds, Davy's running for a touchdown. The crowd appears and his mother cheers, she's waving from the field, and he's evergreen at 17 for the last 11 years. And it's just the perfect like little like country kind of like chorus, I feel like, and it's such a descriptive, vivid picture. She's basically saying, I don't want to go back home. It has memories of the friends that I've kind of lost. And it sounds like this person, Davy, you know, obviously was on the football team. Sounds like he was maybe like the hometown hero, because if you grow up in a small town, you know, sometimes the high school football team really is like that pillar of the community. And to lose someone that, you know, it sounds like was a star on that, it would be really hard for the whole town, you know. And I love that line, he's evergreen at 17 for the last 11 years. Like, it just talks about like how sad it is to have someone like kind of frozen in time for when you lose them. But evergreen at 17, just such a good rhyme. And also too, I wonder if that's intentional. Like, I don't know if this Davy person she's referencing truly like passed away at that age, but 17 is a lucky number for Halsey, I believe. So I assume that's intentional at least, but, or an interesting coincidence. I also made note of that it says, you know, I never felt like anyone. I was a paradoxical lie. This is in the second verse. I didn't think that I was special, but I was too afraid to die. So she's saying, like, I didn't really feel like I fit in, but I was, like, too scared to, like, maybe act on, like, suicidal ideation. That's my interpretation. Could be a stretch, but that's what I think she's meaning there. She says, like the others from my high school, all those sad suburban ghosts, again, referencing, like, friends who have passed away for one reason or another. She said, trapped in a cross next to a highway while the rest of us get old. So even talking about you could just lose a friend from an accident on the highway, you know, and talking about how like sad it is to like go back to your hometown knowing how many people like you've made memories with who truly have never left their hometown because that's where they, you know, passed away. It's just, it's sad, it's morbid, but again, if you like, one of the things about Halsey is that she'll always have like the most upbeat or like good like dance music, so you could like put her songs on for like a party DJing in the background. But if you really stop and take in the lyrics like I do, like some of these are like,
I am forced to watch as they play doll with my life, as they swing me around like a toy. I want it to end. I want it to end. I want it to end. Please. I want the eyes gone. Stop watching me. Stop controlling me. Kill me. Kill me. Kill me.
that's just why I love her, because I think it's brilliant when you can like do both of that at the same time. I also wrote down a lyric that says, you know, the American dream means staying young forever, and a picture in a pamphlet getting yellow from the weather. You know, to me that brings up imagery of like either a like, I forget the term for it, but like the little like cards you get for like someone's like funeral or memorial service. It kind of reminds me of that. Like that's like one of the things we hold on to after someone passes away, but like obviously all it's going to do is like fade or get yellow from the weather. I also took this line to possibly mean like, you know, the pressures of Hollywood, staying young forever, in a picture in a pamphlet getting yellow from the weather, right? Like think about when you are in the public eye like that, you're on so many like advertisements, whether it's like a brand deal or a magazine photo shoot or, you know, your album like artwork and stuff like that. But it's like, if we would have really lost Halsey before this album, like, right, like that's where she is like kind of memorialized, is like in that art and like in that stage of her life. And over time it's just gonna get yellow from the weather. Or even like if your career flops and like people don't accept you and your career falls like later in life as you like age or something like that, or like as you change genres and like fans don't accept that. There's all these different ways that like your career could kind of die, so to speak, and you would just be like that, you know, that magazine that's now faded, or someone's album that they never like pull out anymore, you know? So just a lot of meaning that could be just in that one exact line. And years will pass since science class, and I might forget your name, but when the cold feet come and the kingdom comes, well, you'll always look the same. And she kind of like giggles as she sings in this one line, so it kind of ends on like a higher note. This song walks the line very well between talking about death in a serious way, but also talking about the lighthearted or like the hopeful parts of like, you know, someone moving on to the afterlife kind of thing. Because again, who knows where Halsey was at in her healing journey when she wrote this particular track, but she talks about how like, I might not have seen you for these 11 years that you've passed away, Davy, but like if I end up passing away, like you're always gonna look the same. Like I'll recognize you because that person hasn't aged. Like they're gonna be preserved there. And again, her idea of the afterlife, just such a little endearing like gesture or like way to kind of talk about like, you mean something to me, I've missed you. And it talks about like the afterlife as almost like a point of reunion for that. And I think a lot of us, like no matter if you're religious or spiritual or not, like I think we all like hold out that little spark of hope that like we'll be reunited with our loved ones, or at least in a happier place. So I just loved that the song ended on that. Moving on to track 10, I Never Loved You. This is kind of like a slower, quieter kind of song. I really honestly didn't like it at first when it was put out as a single before the album. I just felt like, I don't know, some songs, this is with Halsey, this is with Taylor Swift, this is with a lot of artists, I just feel like sometimes I need a song to marinate on me. Like the first listen, I just really don't like it, but then I give it like 4, 5, 6 more tries, or I give myself a few days to really like sink in, and then like all of a sudden like something in the song hooks me, or the lyrics. That was kind of the case with this song. I will definitely say it's probably not one of my favorites, but there's some good stuff on there. This is again very much talking about Halsey's health scare. I made note of the line where she says, I think this is the very first line of the song, she says, "They're cutting her up on the operating table, but it wasn't enough. The front desk pages, it's a call for the ages. They couldn't save her. They couldn't save her," right? So talking about how scary it can be to go into a surgery, especially if it's like a risky one where there's a chance of, you know, more problems, or like it's really difficult on the body. And so she's kind of imagining that, you know, someone is there waiting for her in the waiting room, and the front desk is getting paged and talking about how like something's gone wrong. Maybe this person's like passed away at this point. The surgeon said she had a hole in her heart, but it wasn't her fault. It was there from the start. So talking about whoever was being operated on, we can assume maybe it's Halsey. Like she had this void, but it wasn't her fault. So to me, that's like calling back to like how all the trauma that she's experienced has impacted her, causing this little bit of a void. But at least she's not internalizing it. She's able to say like, but it wasn't her fault, which I feel like is at least a step into Halsey's healing journey. I think in a lot of these other songs, she calls back to the trauma, but she's still kind of like blaming herself in certain ways. Maybe I'm just thinking about her past albums and maybe not so much the songs we've just covered, but I made note of that, you know? Trying to love you through an open wound, because everything I put inside there just fell right through. Now, obviously, we haven't heard her talk about love in a positive way since that earlier song, Panic Attack. But again, assuming that it's like her now fiance, I think they're only engaged. I don't think they've gotten married yet. That Avon Joyga guy I talked about earlier. I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing his last name wrong. But I'm assuming that she's now kind of put him into this song as like the muse who's like waiting for her. Because she's kind of saying like, I'm sorry that I had this hole in my heart. I really tried to love you through this like, you know, open wound. I thought I was damaged goods, right? She talks about that on, I think, Panic Attack, or maybe it was the end, but yeah, she's like, but everything just fell right through, like it all fell through, basically. They couldn't save me, is what she's kind of saying. Like, it sucks that, like, I just started to love you, and, you know, I passed away. Maybe she's even writing this to her son, Ender, you know, that could be it as well, even though he's, like, obviously very little here. Maybe she's imagining, like, adult him waiting for her or something. She says, "And I hold the parts together with some pressure and glue, and you're running in slow-mo through the hospital room. If you only knew how bad it hurt me too. Like, basically saying if I passed away, like, it would be so sad to like witness my partner running after me in the hallway of the hospital, knowing that like I can't be there with them in that moment when they realize that they've lost me. But wishing that you could tell that person it hurt me so bad to like leave you. Like, ugh, just such a sad, like, deep thing to think about. But I just love that like Halsey's not afraid to like really go here and really just like talk about this stuff, because I think no matter what kind of grief you've been through, whether you've been on the side of like a very like hard health risk or like really scary time with your own personal health, or you've lost someone to a health like issue, I just think it's hard sometimes to find spaces where we can just talk so candidly about that. And that's what I just love about music and like words and lyrics, whether it's poetry, whether it's writing, whether it's songs, like. And I just think, again, Halsey doesn't get enough appreciation with all these critics who say she's giving main character energy. Like, at what point in anything that I've said so far sounds like main character energy? Please tell me. Please leave it in the comments below. Anyway, back to the lyrics here. Then I made a note. She says, so now, this is the chorus. She says, so now you can take the money, you can get on a plane to a beautiful island, build a house in my name. You can donate all the money to somebody in pain, and you can rest your head down and not feel any shame. I never loved you. I never loved you. I never loved you in vain. That probably sounded weird with me saying that so monotone, but it's really pretty how she like sings it very gently if you actually listen to the song. The only reason why I'm not putting the actual like audio in these videos is because I am sure YouTube will copyright strike me even if I like start to just upload the video, because it goes through some automatic checks before I can even like make this live to you guys. So I don't want to run the risk of them copyright striking me, and I don't know if that would mean I would have to like re-record. So this is just all the more incentive for you to go and stream these songs, or like pause this video, go listen to the song, and then come back here, you know, help her with the streams. And this is not sponsored. I am just your volunteer Halsey stan spreading the good word. Anyway, so with that chorus, she talks about basically like if I pass away, like I've made all of this money in my career, and like I'd be leaving it to either like my son or like maybe my partner at that time. And it sounds like, at least the perspective I take, is that Halsey maybe doesn't fully trust the person that she's leaving everything to, whoever that might be, because it almost sounds like she's giving this person permission to like take her money and do all these different things. But I almost get the vibe of she's like, you know, thank you at least for loving me. Take all this stuff. You don't have to feel bad about me like passing away. Like she's almost kind of saying like, it's kind of like if you were on the Tumblr sphere back in the day, there was like this one quote that would go around that's like, you could cut my throat or you could slit my throat and I would like apologize for bleeding on you. I think that was like the quote. But this is kind of the vibe that this chorus like gives to me. You're saying like, take the money, get on the plane, you know, do all this stuff and like, don't feel any shame. And when she says, I never loved you a few times, I think it's leading up to saying, I never loved you in vain, almost like she's stuttering, like, I never loved you. I never loved you. Like, it's hard to get this whole sentence out. And then she says, I never loved you in vain. Like, I didn't love you for no reason. She's finally saying, like, I give you permission. But I just get this undertone that she, like, feels guilty for even, like, getting into a relationship with this person. Maybe it's because she met them right before she like was about to pass away, and so she feels bad to have put them through that journey with her. Or maybe it's just more of that like internalized like self-loathing that Halsey talks about on this album. Who knows? But yeah, just again, a very beautiful like different angle to look at like what this kind of process would look like on a relationship, to go through all these different health issues that Halsey had going on, not to mention her navigating motherhood and navigating being a pop star amid like just everything going on in the world. So just a lot to appreciate there. Then I made note of the line that says, they're sewing me shut. I think this is the second verse, like starting. She says, they're sewing me shut, opening the doors and then removing their gloves, taking the long way to the end of the hallway. They couldn't save her. This I feel like could be symbolic for a lot of different things. I think it's more than just on the surface giving another like line to feed this like hospital scene. I think maybe she's like referencing her career a little bit and like how people around her at her label, or again like her manager, I don't think she's talking about like Anthony Lee specifically, but like, you know, the people that are higher up in the music industry. She's kind of saying they're sewing me shut, you know, opening the doors and then removing their gloves. Like maybe her career has been open in many ways, but like as she's getting older, or like because she took some time away because of her health and like motherhood, that like maybe she feels like she's getting punished by the industry. Like they're taking the long way to the end of the hallway. Like they're dragging this out before they, I don't know, kick me out. Maybe I'm like just going crazy with making that connection. Let me know if you feel like that could be like, if you feel like you get me where I'm going with this direction. But I think it's talked about so much in the industry how women have so many pressures to like keep touring, keep putting out albums, keep being relevant, keep staying young, because it's like you only have so many years, you have to be grateful for the ones that you get, kind of thing. And so I just felt like maybe she was like alluding to that a little bit with this line, but saying like they couldn't save her. Like I thought maybe Halsey's saying like they're doing everything they can on the surface to make it look like they're accommodating me or giving me all the like best options they can, but like I'm seeing doors shut in front of me, or like they're taking the long way to tell me that, you know, they can't save me, that they can't support me in the ways that they were before. I also took note of a line that says, "You told the nurses that we argued a lot, and you're rambling on about the last time we fought. You drove off screaming on the night you were caught. You left me standing in the parking lot." So here's my thing. I don't know if this song is meant to necessarily just be like one specific partner, or like maybe one specific person that she's talking about throughout. Because if she's talking about Avon, I don't think that she's talking about him in this part. I mean, there's nothing that's really given me the signal that they actually fight, and it would kind of surprise me if they fought like that, given how they talk about each other on social media these days. To me, it spoke to like her past relationship with G-Eazy when she's talking in this part, because they definitely had a toxic relationship. Halsey has definitely not been private about that. In different performances, she's made references, in interviews, she's made references. And also, I don't think it's that surprising with how G-Eazy kind of presents himself and his like whole stage persona, that like he would not be the most like loving and healthy partner to have. But there was this point in their relationship where I think G-Eazy was like doing some kinds of drugs possibly, or at least was under the influence of alcohol. I think they were in like Switzerland or some international country off in that area, and Halsey was with him. I think they were both like doing some drugs, or at least under the influence, and a fight had broken out between G-Eazy and someone else, and I think Halsey got in the crossfire somehow. I don't know if she was like trying to stop the fight or what happened, but Halsey ended up getting a black eye, and it was in the press because there was pictures, paparazzi got photos of Halsey and G-Eazy leaving in the same vehicle together. I don't think there was ever like a specific shot of her black eye, but I think you could like see that there was like some covering going on of like her face. But Halsey references kind of like the black eye, I feel like, on Manic a few times, both with like the cover. If you see the cover of Manic, it's her face. So basically, I felt like that obviously had a huge impact on Halsey and probably their whole relationship and everything. And who knows if that was the first or only time. Not that it's like okay to speculate on that kind of stuff, not trying to break into their privacy, but I just can tell that that had a big impact on her. I just felt like she was referencing, in this part of the song, she's kind of referencing, okay, I have this partner now who I like love, and I'm okay with them taking all my stuff. But like, what if I had passed away, or this was happening to me when I was in that toxic relationship? Like, what do I picture that that partner would kind of be saying? And so I imagine that she thinks that G-Eazy would talk about them arguing a lot, and that he would just ramble about the last time that they fought, almost like maybe to, I don't know, maybe use that moment as a time for him to get pity, of like, oh, we fought all the time, so that the nurse could be like, oh, it's okay, you know what I mean? Like, that's the way I'm interpreting it. Because then she talks about, you drove off screaming on the night you were caught. Like, caught for what? Halsey's talked about G-Eazy getting caught for cheating, how she had like to find out by confronting the girls he was cheating with, who ended up telling him everything. So I could see G-Eazy being the kind to drive off screaming on the night that she confronts him about that. She says, you left me standing in the parking lot. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me if that's how that went down. So that's what I picture for that line. I took off chasing you down Route 22 because you never listen and I'm terrible too. You keep on driving far away from the issues. If you stopped, I would have kissed you. This, who knows the muse? I don't feel like I could definitively put anyone in the box here, but I wrote this down because she's kind of talking about a relationship where they're both like moving on together because they're both chasing down this route. And she says, like, you never listen and I'm terrible too. So it's at least to a space where like they can both admit their faults. Like, it's not like you never listen. She's able to say, like, I'm terrible too. You kept on driving away from the issues, but if you stopped, I would have kissed you. So this kind of sounds like, I don't know, a love that like didn't fully get to bloom. So who knows? Interesting. Track 11, Darwinism. This song almost reminds me of like a 21 Pilots song. It's very like, I don't know, spacey themed, if that even makes sense. Like, it gives you alien vibes almost in the way that like she uses her voice to do different pitches in the song and just like the little background sounds. The opening line, she says, there's lots of fish out on the pond, in the oceans and the rivers and in the waterfalls. But if I'm made for land and not the sea at all, could I crawl and find some kind Neanderthal? So she's basically saying, like, I understand there's a lot of like partners out there that I could choose from, but what if I'm just like, what if I'm made for land and not the sea, right? Fish live in the sea. What if I'm not made to like interact or like find a long-term partner? She's essentially saying, could I crawl and find some kind Neanderthal? She's like, is there somewhere else that I can turn to now to find connection if it can't be like that partner kind of thing? Then I made note of the line, and what if I'm from outer space and I have fire in my bones and in my veins? I let it show and scare my suitors far away, leaving them traumatized with visions of its glow behind my face. They say that God makes no mistakes, but I might disagree. So she's kind of describing herself in different ways about like how alien she feels. She talks about a fire in her bones and her veins that could be referencing to her temper. I let it show and I scare my suitors far away. So as soon as I fully like show myself or fully show my emotions, I leave them traumatized, right? So she feels like she's just scaring everybody off when she lets them too close. She said, they say that God makes no mistakes, but I might disagree. So she's like, again, very much in that self-loathing place for this song. If everyone has someone, then the math just isn't right. Am I the only outlier, the lonely archetype? If everything is by design, well, I might disagree. Sounds like she's just like not accepting anyone else's like attempts to comfort her, right? She's saying everything's not by design, right? God maybe does make mistakes, right? It's almost like people are telling her these different things like, oh, well, God doesn't make mistakes. Oh, everything's by design. And she's like, I don't think so. Which again, I think makes sense with the backdrop of everything going on in her life at this time. She just sounds like feeling very, very hopeless. I think this is the bridge of the song. She starts to say, you all know something that I don't. You've all learned something that I fear I'll never know. You all grew body parts I fear I'll never grow. You all know something that I don't. So she's kind of just like, again, not accepting any other reason for what's happening. She's blaming herself and she's just saying, I'm just alien. You guys all understand the rules. You guys have all found a way to like find partners and not fuck it up. And I just can't get there. She says, what if I'm just cosmic dust? Shoot me into space and leave me to combust, right? So again, kind of referencing death here a little bit because it's, I don't know how to properly say this, but I know it's like a thing that people talk about how like we're made of cosmic dust, like human beings, or like our bones have elements in them that come from the stars. So she's talking about like, what if I'm just cosmic dust? Like especially if she died, depending on if she, you know, got cremated or however she wanted to do end of life procedures, right? She goes back to cosmic dust. Shoot me into space and leave me to combust. Like kind of like shoot me in the yard that was said in the Dog Year song earlier. Leave me to combust, like leave me to just explode then. And it also sounds like, again, her partners have been scared away by her showing her fire, right? So she's like, just leave me to combust then if you're not going to be there for me when I show those sides. She says, return to earth and just dissolve into its crust. And I was born all by myself. It's not unlikely that I'll die like that as well. So again, just like a lot of preoccupation with end of life. Makes sense, right? This is the main character energy that makes sense. Track 12, one of my favorite songs for sure. This is like the Evanescence inspired song. It's called Lonely is the Muse. I would definitely say if you're a fan of like 90s alternative, 2000s alternative, you will like this song. It's a very like slower, edgier, just kind of like rock ballad kind of thing. The opening line says, I spent years becoming cool, and in one single second, you can make a decade of my efforts disappear. So this song is talking about her meeting someone up at a bar, which she'll say in the next line, but she's meeting someone, it sounds like for a date, and she's talking about how like she's this kid who grew up on Tumblr, who kind of did a fake it till you make it to become famous. She's now this like bigger pop star, but on the inside, she still feels like that uncool kid. So she's saying, I spent years becoming cool, but in one single second, you can make a decade of my efforts disappear, right? So she's saying that this person is also so cool or whatever that she just feels floored by him immediately. I'm assuming that this is about the first time that she met Avon. She does talk in some interview about how this is about meeting someone for the first time. I think she might even say it is Avon and that he like blew her away with just like how cool and suave and like interesting he was right off the bat. The next line says, I'm just waiting at the bar and you rip open all my scars by saying something like, didn't know you were here, which is presumably how he caught her off guard right away. He's saying, oh, I didn't even know you were here. Almost like, oh, I didn't notice you, which probably was just said in like the most nice, like casual, like opening way, but could intimidate you, right? If you're used to like not being seen or being made fun of and you've tried so hard to build up this cool and confident persona, and then that person's like, oh, I didn't even see you there. You know, it could totally like, at least for me, could derail that very fast. Then I made note of how she kind of builds up to the chorus for this song. She says, I always knew I was a martyr and that Jesus was one too, which I don't know if this is intentional or not, but to me this feels like a callback to the band Brand New, which does a lot of like Jesus references. It's not the first time that Halsey has used Jesus as like a symbol in her songs, especially on the last album. If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power had a lot of like Christianity references in there. She says, I always knew I was a martyr and that Jesus was one too, but I was built from special pieces that I learned how to unscrew. So we could kind of talk about how this is saying, okay, yeah, I might be like Jesus, but I'm also still alien, right? How she was just talking in Darwinism, because she's saying, I was built from special pieces, but I learned how to unscrew them. So she's saying, like, even though I might be weird and alien, I've learned how to like morph myself, right? She's the Great Impersonator. I've learned how to morph myself into becoming something new or something different, almost like spending 10 years becoming cool, right? And I will always reassemble, right? I learned how to unscrew those parts, but I'll always reassemble to fit perfectly for you or anybody that decides that I'm of use. Lonely is the muse, and that's like the chorus basically. So she's basically saying, yeah, I've learned how to morph myself perfectly. I can be this or I can be that for anyone that decides that I'm of use. I think that's, again, talking about the industry. Halsey can morph into a lot of different genres. She's done a lot of different types of collabs, from like collabs with 30 Seconds to Mars to Pharrell and Calvin Harris to Bring Me the Horizon. She has such a widespread capabilities in what she does singing wise. And obviously that could serve you in the industry, but I could also see that that could be tiring sometimes. Taylor Swift talks about how like you have to kind of reinvent yourself like era to era. All the major pop stars have had to kind of do this to a certain extent to just keep people interested, but also not change too much. And so I think she's just kind of talking about, you know, that impact in this line. In the second chorus, it gets a little bit heavier. So again, if you like kind of like a heavier rock ballad, you're gonna love this song. Listen to it after this video. She opens the second verse with saying, so where do I go in the process when I'm just an apparatus? I've inspired platinum records. I've earned platinum airline status. So if we're talking about the industry again, forcing her to morph, she's kind of saying, so where do I go in the process? If I have to change myself to be interesting, what do I do with my actual like true self during this time? She says, I'm just an apparatus. I'm just this vehicle to, make money for the record labels or keep this going, keep supporting my family, perhaps even. I'm sure that Halsey, after all the success she's had, maybe even feels a personal pressure to just keep things going, to keep everything flowing in her, to support her family, I've inspired platinum records. The 1975 Maddie Healy, him and Halsey did date during her EP era into Badlands era. There are the 1975 songs that are inspired by Halsey. I'm pretty sure one of them is the song The Sound. The song that's like, well, we go around 'cause you know the sound, I know the sound of your heart. That's like my awful cover of it. It was popular on the radio a few summers ago. I'm pretty sure that's about Halsey. If not, I know there's definitely a song on one of their albums that's like a black and white cover, and I think it's called She's So American. That's definitely about Halsey. I know that one is. I assume one of his songs has gone platinum. I know that G-Eazy, one of his most popular songs, is his collab with Halsey and still is to this day, right? So she's inspired that, as well as I'm sure plenty of other songs G-Eazy has written about her, both during their relationship and post, because we all know who's more relevant after that. That's the platinum records that I'm referencing from this line. She says, I've earned platinum airline status, talking about her level of success and how it's afforded her to be able to travel and all that. Then I made note of the line that says, and I've mined a couple diamonds from the stories in my head, but I'm reduced to just a body here in someone else's bed. So she's kind of saying, I've made all of this success, but I feel reduced to just a body here in someone else's bed. So who knows? Maybe that's how she felt initially in putting herself out there and dating with a bunch of different people. Again, who knows if in her songs that her muse stays consistent throughout. Obviously she could have full freedom to talk about one person for this verse and another person and that verse, and she doesn't have to tell us that. I just think it's fun sometimes to make the real life connection if I think an artist is really trying to comment on that or share that, if that makes sense. Then she says, and I will always be a martyr. I will fill your life with sounds. I'll be a wind chime in the window, catching light you throw around, which I think was just such a beautiful line. She's basically saying I'll fill your life with sounds. I will just exist to make this music if that's what you guys want from me. I do know Halsey dabbled in acting for a little bit. She signed some contracts for different movies or shows. I think only one of those movies is actually released right now, but I could be wrong. Aside from the movie that Halsey put out for her last album, I did go and see that in the theaters with a group of friends, which was really fun. But other than that, I'm wondering if she's kind of saying I will just fill your life with sounds. Music seems to be what you guys want from me, because I don't think her acting necessarily took off very much. She does have a makeup brand right now too, technically, called About Face, that seems to be doing pretty well for itself, but I think Halsey's just kind of maybe commenting on how she feels music is the lane she should be kind of sticking to, but who knows. I also made note of the line, and I will tear apart your bedroom. I will call you in the night. I will exist in every second just to decorate your life. So at first she was kind of talking about positive ways of how she will kind of be as a muse. She'll say I'll fill your life with sounds. I'll catch light you throw around. Maybe even saying I'll notice the good parts of you and I'll put them into my songs about you. So she's saying, here's all the ways I could be a good muse. But then she kind of goes to this more negative or more vengeful almost version where she's I'll tear apart your bedroom. I'll call you in the night, right? I'll be watching you. I'll exist in every second. She says it just like that in the song. I will exist in every second. Do you like that little face I did for you there? Just to decorate your life. Basically almost resentfully swallowing this idea of being secondary to someone. Oh, I'll just be a decoration in your life. The last line I'll say before we move on to track 13. And when you're done, you can discard me like the others always do. And I will nurse my wounds until another artist stains me new. So basically she's saying yeah, you can move on from me. Everyone always does that. But I will put myself back together, or I will reassemble my parts until another artist stains me new. Begrudgingly saying that collabing with different artists or presenting herself in a different way has kind of kept her career alive. And maybe she's feeling resentful of that. Who knows? She could just be like, you know, commenting or making things that rhyme, but I could understand being frustrated with something like that. Again, I think Halsey is endlessly talented, and I think this world has just truly misjudged her. And it's the world's own fucking fault, and I'm perfectly fine with being a stan and not having to like fight for my life on Ticketmaster to get tickets for her concerts right now. Because I don't know about you, but I got tickets for Chicago, so if you're gonna go see the Great Impersonator tour, hit me up if you're gonna be in Chicago to hang out. But yeah, I just think people take Halsey for granted, and what a scary time in her life to be, you know, at the face of all these different challenges, both personally and professionally. So she's just underrated. That's all I'll say about track 12. Track 13 is Arsonist, which basically, Ego, Lonely is the Muse, and Arsonist are like probably my top 3 from this album, to be honest. And they could all honestly be on their own little EP or their own like album. I feel like they all are very like in the same genre of like alternative and rock and stuff like that. But at first when I listened to this song, I didn't like it at all. It's almost like a whispery song, or more of like a talking like kind of track as opposed to like a singing ballad. This track supposedly is about Halsey's ex-partner. His name is truly slipping my mind, but he's not important anyway, so we don't need to name him. But he is essentially the father of her child. They were together for, I want to say like a couple of years. From the very little lore that I remember, him and her had been like kind of friends through like social media or like networking since like, I think right before she was dating G-Eazy, but it sounded like the only like real record we have publicly of their interactions is that he went to like a Lakers game, and Halsey's a big Lakers fan as well. And either like she hooked him up with tickets to a Lakers game one time, or vice versa somehow. But I remember like on both of their Instagrams back in like 2016 or 15, they like had referenced each other in a post. Other than that, it sounds like he was involved in like either one of her music videos a couple of years later or something like that. And at the time he was in a relationship, but she was like a little bit crushing on him, but nothing like happened. And this is coming from another single Halsey put out like last year, where she does kind of admit to like all of this, and the music video itself even like talks about how he was involved in a past video. But yeah, they started like actually dating again, it sounds like sometime in, I don't know, I think 2019 or 2020, and that was like around the time that she got pregnant, and I think they stayed together until about like a year or two into like the baby being born and everything. So this is the first time we kind of get a song that has her commentary on maybe what went wrong in this relationship, or shows a depiction of him that's like not so positive, because on Halsey's last album, she did what seemed like one of her sweetest and like most beautiful love songs for this person. So at that time, that's all we really had to go off of like what the relationship was like. I did find it puzzling as a Halsey stan that like they never like kind of got engaged at the time that they were together. Not that like, you know, every couple has their own journey, but like with them just having a kid together and like been around for so long, I just kind of felt like, well, what's the wait, or like what's going on here? Maybe it was because, you know, their relationship wasn't all that it seemed. But anyway, that's just the background to let you know like what she's kind of talking about. So I make note of the opening line where she says, "Arsonist, burning down the world to feel its heat. The arsonist doesn't feel the embers on his feet." So she's basically just saying someone's burning down the world, but he doesn't even care. He doesn't even feel the embers at his feet. Then it says, "Arsonist, your human starter kit came incomplete. My apologies, arsonist. You loved me." So she's basically saying you're not fully human. Something is incomplete. Your human starter kit didn't come with everything. And then she's also apologizing for this person falling in love with her, which again is still commenting on some like self-loathing that Halsey has here. "I'm glued to a building that's on fire, handcuffed to a narcissistic liar." So oof, we got the first zinger towards this person, right? Calling him a narcissistic liar, and she's saying I'm glued to a building that's on fire, which we can kind of assume is her saying I'm glued to this person. I'm glued to this narcissistic liar. Our house is on fire, right? This family that we built is burning to the ground essentially, and supposedly it's by him if we're to assume that he's the arsonist, and he doesn't even care, but she's stuck with him because they have a kid together. This partner that we're talking about He's from Turkey, if I'm correct. I think he's Turkish. So after they split, he went back to Turkey. She's still obviously in the US, and I know that there was like a report that said that she got primary custody of their son. Who knows the ins and outs or why, doesn't really matter, but at least she has primary custody, because I know how much that rainbow baby meant to Halsey, and if this guy is this narcissistic liar like she claims he is, better for the child anyway. Empty space and lethargy, eyes ablazed with apathy. Fool me twice, the shame is on me. In this line, she's describing this person like just truly doesn't care that this house is on fire. His eyes are ablazed with apathy. Literally couldn't care, even though there's a fire right in front of him. And so when she says, fool me twice, the shame is on me, my first thought is that she's saying, the shame's on me that I have now been with 2 narcissistic liars in a row. Because I would call G-Eazy the first narcissistic liar that she's referencing, and he has possibly been referenced on other songs. I don't know if that's for sure or not on this album. Or it could mean, like I said, her and her baby daddy like had some kind of interaction years and years and years ago before they got together and like got pregnant. So possibly maybe they did have a little fling or something like that, and like she got a red flag about him, and maybe that's why things didn't continue. And so maybe she's saying, you fooled me now 2 times, and it's the shame on me for falling for it twice. Like maybe she made an excuse when she got together with him again years later. Who knows? Then the next line says, am I a victim of your game? Am I a subtle antique plate? Will you pass me through your bloodline with your ornamental rage? So she's kind of trying to make sense of like, why are you so apathetic? Why have you done this to me? Am I just a victim of the game? Am I just like a subtle accessory for you that you're going to pass through your bloodline with your ornamental rage? Which also makes me wonder if Halsey's commenting on like concern about like if her baby daddy's temper or like even his apathy is going to genetically follow into their son. Then there's a line that says, can I take the blame for everything you hate? The punishment and crime are not the same. So she's commenting on abuse that's possibly happening from this person, whether it be emotional, psychological, verbal, or physical. But she's like, can I take the blame for everything you hate? She's desperate. She's trying to like bargain with this person. But at the same time, she can realize like how wrong this is. She's saying the punishment and crime are not the same. So this person clearly has some kind of temper, this arsonist, and she feels compelled for some reason to like try to subdue it, try to like stoke the flames. You built a small container to keep all of me confined. I am shapeless, I am fluid, I'm divine. Somebody will love me for the way that I'm designed. Devastation, creation, intertwined. So she's basically like commenting on like that she's going to be leaving this person now, and she's saying, you pushed me into this small container, but I am shapeless, I'm fluid, like you can't hold me down. And she is going away from this self-loathing space and into like self-empowerment. She's saying somebody's going to love me for the way I'm designed. Even if I am this alien, like I'll find that kind Neanderthal that she talked about earlier. And she's saying devastation, creation, intertwined, right? Even though our house is going up in flames right now, I'm also like being recreated. I'm reassembling. I am a phoenix rising from the ashes. It's all happening in the same moment. But you don't love the flames. You just want them for yourself. Like you don't even love that you're burning this house down. You just want to keep me trapped, essentially. And that's my hell and kerosene horizon of hell. So she's like, that would be hell for me to be stuck with you. And you smothered out the glow I grew for you, but it was mine too. So she's saying like, you even tried to like stifle me, but it's not yours to stifle. Later on in the song, alchemy's not love, it's playing God, and there's a penance paid for entering the temple like a fraud in your charade, which is just a very poetic line to basically say like, you tricked me, like, right? She's saying alchemy's not love. You put me under some kind of spell. It's playing God. So she's saying like, because you tricked me, you were trying to like forge fate. You were trying to play God. And she said, there's a penance paid for entering the temple like a fraud. So she's like, you're not going to get away with this is basically what I take from that. You leave me sleeping in the dark so you can hide away your blade, and locked the door and trapped me right here in the blaze. So she's saying this person like left her like a coward while she's sleeping. so that he could like not look like he was trying to be menacing, right? He hid away his blade, but he locks the door and traps her in the blaze. So he's kind of trying to like destroy their home by making it look like some innocent accident that he just wasn't around for. Which is just sad, you know, like if you're gonna leave someone, it's one thing, but like to also be such a coward about it and like be so cruel in how you leave someone. Obviously, this is all a metaphor. We don't know how they truly broke up, but again, such a beautiful way to take a breakup and like put it in this like very poetic framework and like say so much while also saying so little about what happened between the two of them. She ends out the song by like just asking a bunch of questions in a row. It feels like you're having a conversation and she's just kind of like processing like what's gone on at the end of this relationship. She says, "Have you ever been broken and thrown down?" Alluding to abuse there. She says, "Have you ever been worried that if you touch your skin, it'll burn off like acid? Have you ever given the world to somebody and had it returned?" Which, I just felt like hit me in my soul the way that she said that. Like, it sounds like she very much loved this partner. I think it's clear on her last album, if you listen to the love song inspired by the person who was just talked about in this song, like it's a very different portrayal. And it really seemed like Halsey gave it her all. Obviously, I wasn't in that relationship. Only the two of them know what went on. But to hear her say, like, have you ever given the world to somebody and had it returned? Like, I just think that that talks about how heartbroken she was about how things ended. Did you know that the father's DNA stays inside the mother for 7 years? Have you ever waited 7 years? Which I thought was interesting. I saw someone else cover this, I think on TikTok, and like, it's not exactly in the way she portrays it, but there is some kind of scientific evidence that like remnants of like genetic or like remnants of DNA does like kind of remain somewhere in like the body's system up until 7 years after like conception happened for like a mother. But it's not as literal as like the DNA staying inside the mother. But it's just interesting because she's kind of commenting on like, not only have you ruined my life and burned down my house, but like I have to kind of stay connected to you in my literal body for 7 years. She ends out with these last 3 questions. She says, "Have you ever woken up from a dream just to realize that you're still asleep?" Which I think comments on like maybe the point when Halsey realizes like she was head over heels in love with him, but she starts to realize he's this narcissistic liar, and she feels that like shame on you vibe for like you fooling me twice. She's like, I woke up from a dream just to realize that I'm still asleep. I woke up just to realize that I was still asleep to these like red flags, basically. And maybe that's why she writes Panic Attack, because again, I think that Panic Attack song is about Avon. And if she was really trying to fall for him and it was actually feeling safe, I could understand being so apprehensive about it. Like, am I just asleep again kind of thing? Do you ever wish you were still asleep? Do you ever wish you wouldn't wake up? And she says that one in a very like haughty, like kind of breath at the end of the song. But again, I think it's Halsey just being Halsey, just being real and still saying like, yeah, even though I'm going through all this shit, there's still times when I'm like, yeah, I wish I wouldn't wake up. Even though like she's constantly fighting back and forth between like existential dread throughout this album. Then we're moving to track 14, which is Life of the Spider, Draft. This is a very stripped down song, I would say. It truly sounds like you are listening to Halsey perform this like in her bathroom. Like if she just was like singing a cappella. I don't remember how much like really instrument there is in the back because I don't listen to this song a ton, but I am very impressed with it. I just think you have to be kind of in the mood to listen to this one, because it's a little bit more sad, but it's kind of talking about, again, like her feeling the unfairness of like her medical conditions that she's going through, and also like starting to develop a relationship, but it sounds like it's very early, like too early for her to feel like she can lean on this person. Let's get into the lyrics. It's 4 a.m. and I'm laying my head against the toilet seat. For several days, I've been living here, too tired to sleep, too sick to eat. And she does start off this song like speaking in a very like weak singing voice, and there's just a light piano in the background. I feel like a monster, and it doesn't help that you will treat me like I've got venom in my teeth. That could be talking about going through like radiation or like chemotherapy treatments and having to be treated very delicately by the people around you just because of like the radioactive parts of like those treatment procedures, like literally causing people to need to stay away from you. Or it could just be a commentary on like how fragile people can treat you when they either know that like you're terminally ill or like in the hospital, and they're like struggling to like kind of be around you, and they're treating you like you're just like made of glass essentially, even if like that's like an over exaggeration. But she's saying like, you know, you're treating me like I've got venom in my teeth. You're treating me like I need to like move away from you. But it could even be a commentary on like maybe Halsey said something to a person, like really like was open and honest about her feelings, and that person took that as venom. Could be a lot of meanings there. She says, because I'm the spider in your bathroom, I'm the shadow on the tile. I came from shelter from the cold, and I thought I'd stay a while. I'm only small, I'm only weak, and you jump at the sight of me. You'll kill me when I least expect it. God, how could I even think of daring to exist? Looking just like this, I'm hideous. So she's using this metaphor of the spider, basically saying like, I'm weak, I'm vulnerable, I'm just kind of trying to hide. And right, she's kind of like been out of the public eye during like this whole time period of getting sick. And she's saying like, you're jumping at the sight of me, right? You're treating me as this monster with venom in my teeth, and you're gonna kill me when I least expect it. Like she's expecting people to turn her back on her, or she's expecting like maybe a doctor not to take her seriously. Or maybe she's even thinking about this like new love that she has. She's feeling like she's trusting and getting close to this person, but she's like, you'll kill me when I least expect it. Like you'll leave me or stop talking to me and things like that. God, how could I even think of daring to exist? Looking just like this, I'm hideous. So thinking about a spider's perspective, right? A spider is just really a weak little thing that's just trying to stay in the shadows, but human beings jump at the sight of it. And, you know, we'll try to kill the spider when it's caught off guard. And it's almost like, oh, how dare a spider exist? Because spiders are just obviously natural. So that's obviously like the literal and the metaphorical meaning. But I think it's just so beautiful how she kind of scales both there. The second verse, she says, I'm nothing but legs, they used to say, right? Could be a spider, could be like talking about just like the human being in Hollywood. I'm nothing but skin and bones these days, right? She's been talking about losing weight. She says, you dangle me high over the drain and tell me I'm lucky you don't drop me there and let me wash away or put me on display by trapping me forever between a glass and a dinner plate, which I feel like is a very loaded verse that's talking about how her career and the pressures from like other parties is impacting her at this time in her life. She's saying like, I'm losing weight and you're telling me that I'm lucky that you haven't dropped me and let me become like kind of washed up or put me on display by trapping me forever between a glass and a dinner plate. I don't know exactly what that's alluding to. Maybe like a threatening that like she needs to just get married and settle down. I don't know. Definitely some venom in that verse. Then she says, because I'm the spider in your kitchen, weaving webs through every year. And I worked real hard on the last one, but the last one got me here. This is like the most blunt Halsey gets on this album by saying that like she feels like her last album was a flop. I worked really, really hard on it, but the last one got me here. It sounds like it didn't do as well, which again, I think is just the world not being ready for Halsey, because I think she's fucking fantastic and I don't fucking care what anyone else says. I'm slowly losing my filter as we get into the second fucking hour of this video. Then she says, I'm minding my own business, but my presence makes you curse. Again, right? A spider is just minding its own business, but I would probably use a few expletives if I just ran into one when I wasn't expecting it. She says, I should be getting better, but I'm only getting worse, commenting on where she was at in her healing. And God, how dare I even think of choosing here to die? Because then I'm just a problem that you have to take outside. So she's saying like the people around her don't even care if she lives or dies. She even feels like she's putting them out if she does. I know you hate the sight of me. I haunt you when you're fast asleep. I've got 8 legs, a million eyes. If only I had 8 more lives. Because I'm the spider on the ceiling and you're nothing but a guy. Don't like it when I cry. You would break me if you tried. And you will because I dared to be alive. So using a lot more spider references, she's basically saying you might want to help me to whoever this guy is that she's talking about, but you don't like it when I cry. Like you can't be there with me in this sadness. You would break me if you tried, right? So you can't really hold me or you can't really like support me in the physical sense because I'm so weak right now. And you will because I dared to be alive. Like she just feels like she is stuck in this pattern of people just taking advantage of her or breaking her or leaving her. And so she's just like waiting for that to happen with this person. And that's where this track ends. We've only got 15, 16, 17, and 18 left. This is a long album, and I had a lot to say, but I hope that you're enjoying this. Hi guys, we are back, and I look a lot different. This is my first debut on my channel with a full face of makeup and like the full dolled out experience. So bonus if you're still here. I had to take a break to like eat lunch, then I recorded more, and so it was starting to get to that like perfect pool time here in Arizona where I'm visiting right now. So I was like, let me take a break, let me take a dip in the pool, and I had just enough time to get a good tan, come back here, and start to get ready to go to dinner when my partner is done with work for the day. Let's just pick back up with track 15, which is Hurt Feelings. This song, I recently watched a clip of Halsey doing a interview with the podcast Call Her Daddy, and she talked about this song specifically and talked about how prior to her getting like really famous, her dad kind of took on the role of being like the main like breadwinner and provider for like the entire family. Halsey has a brother, her and her parents are separated, but it sounds like her dad was like very much like the patriarch of everything. And as her dad got older and as Halsey rose to fame, she was talking in this podcast episode about how they kind of like reversed roles, where Halsey now became kind of that role of the breadwinner, and how it sounds like her dad struggled with that a little bit in terms of like finding his identity and role in the family system now that he wasn't like the main provider. It also sounds like, as we'll see in these lyrics, that in addition to Halsey being a kid, witnessing a lot of fighting amongst her parents and growing up kind of poor, it sounds like she also had kind of like a strained relationship with her dad. And so this track is a lot about just like her experience, and talks about kind of like the ways that parents have been asked to like raise girls sometimes and stuff like that. Last thing I want to say is that in terms of like theme or time frame for this song's like sound, I would say that this is like a song that fits in like the early 2000s category for like what Halsey's trying to impersonate. If you were around growing up on the internet around that time, in the MySpace era, there was this band called Hello Goodbye that had this song called Here in Your Arms. If you're an emo kid like me, you're probably screaming the lyrics right now in your head. But they had like this very like electronic sounding vibe to their songs that were very popular at that time and would often be on like people's MySpace pages. I feel like Hurt Feelings kind of like almost is imitating that specific type of sound. The song opens with the line, "My dad is almost home. I can't tell time yet, but I know, because the air becomes electric and my mom cleans the stove." So she's already describing from a childhood perspective that even though she is so young that she can't tell time, she can tell like through different signals and cues that her dad is about to be home, because the air becomes, as she says, electric, or maybe like a little bit tense, like staticky, and she sees that her mother's cleaning up, possibly to avoid a conflict of some kind. So that's how she's already telling that her dad's gonna come home, because he's probably going to be upset or find something to get upset about. "He'll walk in through the door and both my eyes will find the floor, and I will search my brain to find something I might get yelled at for." So as a young kid, she's already become so accustomed to her parents' temper that she literally is like trying to avoid eye contact when he comes in, and is anxiously trying to make sure that like she hasn't forgotten something that is going to cause her dad to get upset. "He'll come in with a frown and tell me, 'Sit your ass right down,' or he might get his kicks from joking that he's just playing around." So she's basically using this line to talk about how unpredictable her dad can be. Sometimes he can say, "Sit your ass right down," and he's being very serious, or sometimes he'll act in that way and then just say he's just playing around. So it leaves her nervous system to be very like on edge about like what version she's gonna get. "And in a few years I will leave, but I'll perpetually believe that any man who says he loves me is hiding something up his sleeve." So the legacy of that unpredictability, and probably other things mixed in, she's talking about how like this now sets up her perspective on men, or on what to expect if a man loves her, because the main man she has an example for loving her is her dad. Thought that was kind of an interesting way to kind of, you know, talk about like just the legacy of how that environment can like really stick with us, even like going into adult life. Then the chorus comes in and she says, "Wash me in the water, you can cut off all my hair, and I'll be changing like the weather, but I'll never be like him." There's more to the chorus, but that's like the main line that I thought was like pretty brilliant, just like in the flow of all the the lyrics, especially with the background noise if you're listening to the song. Then later on in the second verse, she says, you know, my father isn't dead, but it doesn't feel like he's still here. It's strange now that he's gray and getting older by the day, and my eyes tell me that he's harmless despite what my heart has to say. So kind of like in the song I Believe in Magic, when she was commenting on experiencing like her mom aging, here she's talking about what that's like as her dad, who kind of was intimidating and unpredictable to her, is now like aging as well. And she talks about how like her eyes will tell her that he's harmless because she can see that he's not as like maybe agile or maybe even ill-tempered as he was before. But her nervous system is still saying we can't trust this, right? Because he's created that legacy of being unpredictable as well. Then she says, so maybe just forget, maybe move on, don't regret, or maybe this is just another trick that hasn't happened yet. So basically it's that same exact line, it's the same exact part of the song, but she's just talking about how she's trying to cope at that point. My father's getting older, maybe I just forget about it, maybe I move on, but like try not to regret anything, that it's all like taught me things in life. Or maybe it's just a trick that hasn't happened yet. Maybe the shoe's about to drop kind of thing, right? We see that theme throughout this album. Then the chorus repeats, but she also builds on top of it. So I talked about the line where it said, I'll never be like him. I think the first time the chorus gets sung to you, it really just ends at, I'll never be like him. But in the second version of the chorus adds on, I'm stiffer than a board, lighter than a feather, which reminded me of Olivia Rodrigo's song that talks about like, I am light as a feather and as stiff as a board. I think it's on Sour. Maybe it's on the second one. I'm blanking on what her second album name was. Whatever, it'll come to me later. So she says, I'm stiffer than a board, lighter than a feather. And I do realize for both of those artists, they're referencing, I think, an early 90s or like a 2000s film. I want to say it was The Craft. It's some kind of like teenage, like rite of passage film from that time. So that's where that saying comes from. So yeah, the chorus says, I'm stiffer than a board, lighter than a feather, and that girl will be a problem only if you let her, which I think is trying to call back to like a mantra that is probably guiding what she thinks is like her dad's parenting. You have to be very maybe aggressive, or you have to be very, you know, disciplined in order to like shape a girl into like good character, that you have to be very strict. That girl's only a problem if you let her. Like, you can't let her act that way. You have to like control her, right? That's hard to live under, especially if you have a parent that's like unpredictable. So she says, I'm stiffer than a board, lighter than a feather, and that girl will be a problem only if you let her. And I left her back home, but I cannot forget her. So she's kind of saying like, I left my hometown, right? We've seen in other songs, she talks about losing friends in her hometown. She talks about wanting to escape her home life. She's talking about wanting to like be sick when she's a little kid, and then as she gets older and becomes successful, she doesn't want that. At the end of the song, she kind of says, I thought that it was my fault, and now sometimes I still do. You didn't chase me through the park, so now I'm chasing after you. So she's talking about kind of the longings she had for how her relationship could have been with her dad. She said, you didn't chase after me, so I'm chasing after you. And she talks about how from an adult perspective, she can now see that like it wasn't completely her fault, but sometimes she still goes back to that. And I think we see that in, you know, the various songs we've covered so far, where like, I think it was in I Never Loved You, where she talked about like, it wasn't my fault. But, you know, as she says here, sometimes she still goes back to that. The last line that I made note of from this song, she says, but I can't keep up the illusion or confirm your point of view. Oh, I can't bear to fake a smile when you walk into the room. In that Call Her Daddy podcast episode that I talked about at the beginning of introducing this song, Halsey talks about how there were a lot of times on past albums when she wanted to write a song specifically about her relationship with her dad, but she always felt like it wasn't the right time, or was like really afraid of what the response would be like. It also sounded like in the present, around the time that she was making this album, that their relationship had been pretty strained, which I don't know how much that played a role in her finally putting a song out, or how much of it could have been that she was kind of like on her deathbed or in this very existential place where maybe she thought like, if this is going to be my last album, or, you know, life could change at any moment, so like I can't keep telling myself not to put this out. For whatever reason, I'm glad that she could feel like safe enough to, you know, just express herself completely in her artistry. Because like I said, I think one of the things about Halsey that makes her stand out is that she's not afraid to go to like more darker places or more controversial places. Could she go a bit farther? Sure, but I think anyone can. And I think she does a really good job of like being very artistic in her approach to like discussing certain topics. I think, as she said for this album title, she's a great like impersonator, or she is such a chameleon is the word I want to kind of use, both in like the types of music she can make and just the style that she wears. So that was that song. We're going to now move on to track 16, which is Lucky. This was the main pop single that first came out for this album. It samples a Britney Spears song, which everyone that's like, she's so lucky, do. I don't know. I wasn't a huge Britney stan. I mean, free Britney. Very glad that she is free. But yeah, this song is kind of like sampling on that. I don't know how exactly like true to the original song it is and how much is like creatively changed out, because I really don't listen to old school Britney very much. But yeah, it's a good song. It's cute. I feel like it was her song on this album to be like the radio hit. Although I don't know like how great it really has done on the radio. I am just on Spotify most of the time, so I'm not really listening to the radio. But I think Halsey has had stronger like pop songs on different albums, so it wasn't like my super big favorite, but I wanted to just comment on a few things that she referenced in here. So the first line goes, everybody get in line to meet the girl who flew too high, who does it all just to be liked by strangers that she met online. To me, I feel like that's calling back to her roots. Like I said, when she was 17 or 18 in the like 2010s era, she was very big on Tumblr, and it sounds like because Halsey didn't really feel understood in a lot of places growing up, which like all of us I think can relate to, being teenagers once in our life. She, you know, flew to Tumblr to express her artistry and, as she says, to be liked by strangers that she met online. She kind of like bluffed it a little bit when Anthony Lee found her outside that one venue and was like, what do you do? And she's like, oh, I make music. And then all of a sudden she like literally put herself out there. So I thought that was interesting that she really does start with like, here's my roots. She then says, did it all to be included, my self-loathing so deep-rooted, inner child that's unrecruited, truth is I'm not suited for it. So she's kind of talking about, here's how I got here, right? This led me to all this success, but my inner child was unrecruited. Like I still hadn't healed from everything that had gone on in my past. I was still a kid that was coming into this fame without having addressed all of that stuff. And she said, truth is, I'm not suited for it. She's kind of saying, like, I give up. Like, this has been too much for me. I've had to take a step back. Then it goes into the chorus, and she says, when I die, I won't have time to spend my money, but I hope that you still love me, because I'm so lucky. I'm a star, but I cry, cry, cry in my lonely heart, thinking if there's nothing missing in my life, then why do these tears come at night? And that's why I say, like, I do like this song. It is good, but it just kind of feels like reheated Graveyard in a certain way. But Graveyard is done much better. I think this is great for like a Great Impersonator version of Graveyard, right? Because it's so well an impersonation of a Britney Spears song. So I think that it's fitting in that way. But I just think the whole theme of like, why am I like not happy or not complete was kind of covered in like Graveyard. I will take both. This is not me saying do not make more songs that are like reheated versions. I'm just saying why this one wasn't like up there in the same way that like Lonely is the Muse and all those other ones were. Then in the second verse, it's almost like she's talking about someone else talking about her, like she's imitating them. And it says, and why is she losing so much weight? So someone's being critical of her weight loss. I heard it's from the drugs she ate. So assuming that it's because she's addicted to something. And I feel her, but I can't relate because I never end up in that state. So this person's just truly judging her. They're assuming that she's losing weight because of like a drug, and they're basically saying like, oh, I feel bad for her, but I also would never do that, right? Like she's over there and I'm over here, when in all reality, like they don't actually know what's going on. What was going on is that she was undergoing literally cancer treatment, and you know, and they're not even like interested in actually providing sympathy. They're just there to literally judge and comment on her. Then it goes on, and that same person's supposed to be talking in this line, and they say, a girl like that as a mother must be tough. A problem child, I was rough. That's Halsey now saying, like, I was a problem child. But what do you do with a difficult grown-up? Which I think is kind of funny commentary that I often think we don't think about, is that, you know, sometimes people go through a lot of stuff and it shows up in their personality type, which sometimes can be annoying or frustrating or, like, not make sense to other people. But if you don't heal that, like, they just kind of grow up, and there's pretty much even less you can do to kind of, like, I don't know, modify their behavior if they don't want to change, kind of thing. And as Halsey kind of said earlier in this album, like she didn't really feel a reason or a more compelling reason to try, at least semi-recently we can guess, until she had her kid. She referenced that in an earlier line. So I just thought it was interesting how she's kind of making fun of herself a little bit and be like, what do you do with a difficult grown-up? Like, how do you control me now, kind of thing. At the very end of the song, she says, I left the doctor's office full of tears, became a single mom at my premiere. So here's where she's referencing both of those parts of her life. And she said, I told everybody I was fine for a whole damn year, and that's the biggest lie of my career. And then it just goes back into the Lucky chorus before the song just kind of ends. So it's cute. If you're gonna like want a one song that kind of encapsulates like everything that this album kind of touches on, I think Lucky's a good song. I don't think it's the best, though. I don't think you should judge the album just on Lucky. Then we get to track 17, which, as I said, is Halsey's lucky number, and it's the track that she uses to do the final Letter of God, which is now at 1998. So the last time we had this Letter of God song, it was like an 80s theme, and she was kind of starting to say, like, I don't want to be sick, like, I don't want to be someone that you're getting rid of, and it was more in that, like, performer stage of her life. In this one, oh my God, your heartstrings are going to get pulled for this one. It starts off with her little one-ender speaking, and he says stuff like, say hello, are you ready? Hello, nice to meet you. It's a microphone, it tells a voice. That's my impersonation of Ender. But it's like literally so adorable. If you do nothing else, if you want to just listen to a little adorable kid talk for like 30 seconds, just listen to Letter to God 1998 for a couple of seconds. But you just hear a little back and forth between Ender and Halsey, and he's basically, Ender says like that Halsey's his favorite singer, and it's just the cutest, like most adorable little thing. And then Halsey comes in and she starts saying, please God or whoever you are, and she repeats that 4 times through. Then she says, these days I get less calls because no one wants to hear my voice, which is interesting. It's kind of like, is she talking about her voice in terms of like, no one wants to catch up with me, like I have no friends? Or is she saying no one wants to hear my voice, like I'm not getting any calls for like performances or like for collabs and stuff like that? She says, I miss the days when I was getting text that I could just avoid. As I've talked about, like Halsey has very much like risen to like big fame for a long time. If you know the song Closer, which was super big with the Chainsmokers, I want to say in 2016, but she's had very big popular hits, very popular collabs. I mean, she's up there with like the top 10 female like streamed artists and like all different things like that. So, you know, she's gone from the top to kind of where she's feeling at the time of the writing of this album, you know? Then she says, and I've been trying to be calm and not preemptively destroy. She's trying not to like have a mental breakdown or self-sabotage. She says, I wonder who here really loves me or who wants to be employed. So she's starting to even feel like skeptical of the people around her, which I think is a healthy thing for her to be skeptical of, because as we've seen with some of like the YouTubers or like other famous people, sometimes you can have nothing but yes men around you, or people that really don't have your best interests at heart and will take advantage of you. I mean, even just look at what happened with Britney Spears, right? So you really, really, really have to be careful. And she's looking around and evaluating her life and her relationships very critically at this time of her life as she's going through this. So, you know, I feel for her. She's talking about like having Ender and like watching him just play with his toys on the kitchen floor, and how she doesn't want to leave him, but she doesn't think it's my choice. Like she's feeling again helpless and kind of wondering about like, where's my health gonna go? I have this brand new baby and like I don't want to have to leave him, but anything could happen. Then she says, so I'm basking in these moments when I feel a shred of joy, but I don't think my pleas are heard because I'm shouting in the void. And then we lead into the very end part, which is that same like please God little prayer that we heard in all 3 of them. And so this time it says, I'm screaming, please God, oh you've gotta be sick. Like literally saying like, are you fucking kidding me? Why do you make it hurt, and why is it over so quick? She was like getting upset that like her experience of parenthood has to be potentially cut short because of the health issues that she's going through. Then she says, please God, I'm finally in love. I finally found somebody that I don't want to get rid of. And again, not sure if she's talking about Ender, her baby, if she's talking about Avon, who she's found now as a partner, maybe both, and maybe them and others as well. But she's basically saying, I'm finally at a place where I'm happy. Like, please don't make this the time that you answered that prayer from when I was a kid. And she said, please God, is it busy up there? You took a little while to respond to my prayer. So she's basically saying, like, if that's what did this last time, like, this is me trying to undo what I did in the past. She said, please God, no, this doesn't seem fair. I'm trying not to show it, but I'm terribly scared. Who knows when she wrote all 3 versions of these in her healing journey, but thankfully she's here with us now, and we got to have this album, and she's even going on tour. So finally we've arrived at the very last track of the album, which is the title track, The Great Impersonator. This one I feel like very much gives off circusy vibes in like how she delivers certain lines with her pitch and like her pronunciation and things like that. I grew to love this song. At first I kind of was like, this is odd, or like this is a little like experimental, but I ended up really, really loving it. And I'm excited to see her perform this on the tour and see how she does it. She starts off in saying, no one has to know. She says, I could always hide, but sometimes it might get to me, the things on all their minds. So it sounds like maybe she's talking about not being public about her health issues. She's like, no one has to know. I could always just hide. But she's like, sometimes it might get to me, the things on their minds, like speculating maybe what the public thinks, maybe what her fans are thinking while she goes on this hiatus, basically. She said, like, they don't know I'm lonely, and they don't know I'm kind or scared that I can't hack it with the current paradigm. So she's saying, like, my fans or the public doesn't know I'm lonely. They don't know that I'm actually a really nice person. Like, maybe they're judging me with what they're saying online. And she's saying, like, I'm even scared that I can't, hack it this time. Like, I'm scared that I won't be as successful. Maybe she's like feeling like after her last album didn't do well, that like she can't, evolve in this like day and age of what people want to hear on the radio and things like that. So I thought that was very vulnerable for her to kind of name that there. Also too, she uses the word hack it, right? Like almost like she still feels like she doesn't deserve to be here after having so much success and being such an amazing songwriter, right? Like she internalized like feelings of like not mattering even when her parents were just fighting or just sending her to her grandmother's. And after the Halsey meme that I talked about, or how people just haven't like understood her, imagine how even though you're like famous and rich and things like that, like again, like if you don't like work on that stuff, or like it's not so easy as just working on it, like you really have to feel that difference, and that's everyone's like own personal journey. Like I just feel for her. She says, every single line, every single rhyme, every single truth I sing once started as a lie. So she's basically saying, I've always been an imposter. I promise that I'm fine, but then I redesign and I put myself together like some little Frankenstein, kind of calling back to what she was saying on Lonely is the Muse. I can always reassemble my parts. Then in the chorus, she does this little thing that like tickles your brain kind of, like where she goes, and it's like very like fast like that. Did you like that impersonation? At first that like rubbed me the wrong way, but now I love it because it almost makes you feel like you're winding up like a fake doll or something like that, where it's like been dormant like this. Like here's my little animatronic impersonation. You're like down like this and it's like or like all of a sudden you're like upright and like ready to perform. So I don't know if that was like the intention in how she did that vocal, but that's what it calls back to for me. The chorus says, does a story die with its narrator? Surely it's forgotten sooner or later. Hope they spell my name right in the paper. Herein lies the great impersonator. So she's basically like, again, who knows if she felt like she was going to die when she wrote this song, or if she was already past that and was just like experimenting with the idea of what she would have like ended this album with if she had died. But in this chorus, she's basically saying like, is anyone gonna remember me if I die? Like, have I made that kind of an impact? Or like, do all stories just die when the narrator dies? Obviously it's gonna be forgotten at some point. Will they even care to spell my name right in the paper? Like, is anyone even paying that much attention? Or is it just gonna say, herein lies the great impersonator? Is that how I'm gonna go down? And she says, I'm lying in a car crash in a pile of broken glass. It's funny how it looks like glitter from the overpass. what that made me think about is she's kind of almost saying maybe like breaking the fourth wall. Like, I'm lying in this car crash and here's all this broken glass around me. Like, I've broken the wall. I've told you guys where I've been and how I've literally almost died. I've broken the wall of like my relationship with my dad and all these other things that she's talked about. My relationship with my baby daddy, like everything she's given to us, right? And she's like, it's funny how it looks like glitter on the underpass. Like, I'm guessing her to mean that like all these songs came out very pretty or like upbeat, and so she thinks it's funny how like they look like glitter from overhead if you're just like listening to this album kind of thing. And it was kind of a similar thing. The reason why I'm inclined to say this is because when she wrote Manic, she originally had intended that album, she said, to be like a very like angry album, a very like depressed album, a very like, you know, sad and negative space. But all the songs ended up being very upbeat and very like, you know, glittery, I think is how she's even described them. So that's why I'm kind of like, is she kind of saying that she did the same thing with this album here? I don't know. That's my interpretation. The last two lines I have a note of is she says, I'm in a pickup truck, the door is stuck, I'm sinking in the water, and the girl inside is waving. She's saying like, I'm waving as I'm like sinking into this water, but the people are just applauding me. Like, people are seeing her sink, but they think that she's actually just waving to them. She says, this is a cry for help, calling from a distance, but you can't tell I need it when you're watching from a distance. She's like, you're not even paying attention to me enough to know that I'm suffering this much. And you're misinterpreting this, you know, my cry for help as like me just saying hello, which I think is supposed to be a poetry reference. I can't think of the name of the poem, but there's this poem where she says like, I was like waving, or I was drowning, not waving, or something like that, where it's like the same kind of sentiment. There's someone who's stuck at sea and is like drowning and trying to get the person's attention on shore, but they're like misinterpreting it that like that person's just waving at them. So I assume with Halsey's very well-read, very knowledgeable background in poetry and all that kind of stuff, but that's probably what it is. If not, there's a little coincidence I found, but I have to imagine that like she kind of was trying to make that a little bit obvious. But that's the last line I made of note. I think that might even be the last line of the song. I'm not 100% sure, but phenomenal album. Obviously, I had hours worth of content to talk about for this, so I appreciate you sticking around with me. If you stuck around this long, maybe leave a comment below of, you know, a song that sounded intriguing to you. If you're interested in listening to the album, do you like videos like this? I'm happy to do it for either past releases or anything new that's coming out. I'm looking to find my Halsey community here too. So if you're new to this channel, if you're a Halsey stan, my name is Amber. I have this channel where I'm going to be talking about books, talk about TV shows, talk about, you know, pop culture stuff, a little bit of anything and everything. The commonality is that we're having words with me here. So if you're interested in joining me for the journey, hit subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below, share with your friends, all the things, ring the bell to get notified of my videos, and have a great day, guys. Bye.